making...
Wait, flip it. You're on, we're live right now.
We are? Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Hard Lens Media. Look, we got a lot of serious stories to talk about, a lot of fun stories to talk about, but first and foremost, you guys, thank you again for tuning in. You're really helping us build this channel up. It just seems like yesterday where we were just a very small channel, and now we're just growing up to get a lot of support.
To even get on that, I mean, the amount of people we had waiting to get on this video to start was as many as we would have in our early peak videos. So you guys are really helping us continue to make this a reality. Thank you.
So we got a lot of stories going on, from Julian Assange's arrest towards corruption, as well as I guess the Washington Post still holding on the Russiagate. But first,
and I want to say really quick before we start, and for you, Karab, who is always asking for a good video, we have a wonderful break video, which we'll surprise you with later.
That's absolutely. And and just also for another side note too, we did see the recent Tulsi Gabbard interview on TYT, and it was very interesting, but I think we'll leave our comments on that for another day.
Yeah.
So, guys, other than that, let's get started with the first story. So, right now there is a plan by scientists to basically track the large plastic ocean material or the plastic material that's in the ocean right now, to basically get them out. So, the problem is, they have the technology to see where this large landmass of plastic materials that is in the ocean. We could find it. The problem, though, that a lot of scientists have is that it's a smaller micro material that's impossible to see and catch. And so what they're using now is more of advanced satellite imagery to basically capture the light, I guess the light reflecting on the plastic, and just figuring out all the smaller materials, and then building on more, I guess, capable automation machines to scrape all that plastic out of the ocean. It's a difficult approach to do, but what they're doing is, like, they're really looking for the light to be reflected off the water, and thus, I guess, when the light reflects on the plastic, according to the scientists, it's going to be differently. It's going to be seen differently, and the satellite imagery will then be able to catch where all the smaller micro materials are. I find it fascinating that we are able to really address this issue, because recently Democratic candidate Tulsi Gabbard tweeted out a picture about how our planet is basically suffering due to mankind's constant abuse of this planet by dumping material into our ocean. And there was a photo that's now being shared on social media of this whale that had 60 tons of plastic material within its body. And this article is from the BBC, but right now this project is being operated by the European Space Agency, and they're doing everything they can to really track about 8 million tons of plastic that's globally right now in the ocean. And so it's a large ordeal. It's a huge task to take care of, but it goes to show you just really the impact that humanity has on our planet. And look, plastic doesn't dissolve away like anything else. It's going to be there for thousands of years, and there's a lot of animals that will be impacted by it, as well as the ecosystem. And if we don't do something about it now, we could see, many species dying, just like that whale that was found off the coast with 60 tons of plastic material in it. It's concerning, but I think it's really, I would like to open this conversation to you guys. Paul?
Yeah, so I think one of the more interesting things about this is the sort of the science behind trying to figure out how to identify very small pieces of plastic from the larger pieces or the larger clumps of plastic that we know about and can identify and can see, and are trying to come up with methods of removing from the ocean. So there was like the giant nets and things like that.
Yeah, one of those machines was actually created by this little kid who was concerned about the impact of plastic materials in the ocean, and he created like this little net system with an AI machine, and it was able to just scrap up the micro material from the ocean and just single it out, which is fantastic.
But so the tricky thing is that I'm just sort of fascinated from a technical perspective of how does a satellite differentiate the light that is refracted off of a piece of plastic from light that is simply reflected from waves, right? If you ever look at the surface of water, the surface of the ocean, when light hits it a particular way, you end up with this sort of sparkly effect as sort of the direction of the light reflects directly back at your eye or directly back at the lens that you're looking at it with. So there must be some kind of, okay, when it hits a piece of plastic of this type, it's not going to contain such and such wavelength of light. So that's sort of the nitty gritty of like, I don't know how they do it, but that seems cool.
Well, from the article, what they are doing is they're doing more advanced research onto how the satellite can basically hone in on not only the large materials of plastic, which will be easy to find. It's just more of the micro material.
Yeah, the really small ones. How do you differentiate a very small reflected piece of light from the surface of the water versus one that's coming from a piece of plastic?
All really depends on what size we're talking about. I'm not sure that they're going to be able. So, like, just to kind of bring this back to the beginning with this, that this project that's being worked on is
So, as a final note for this story, and what I want everyone to take away from this article is that we have the resources and the ability to really impact our planet and fix it, so that we don't leave behind a desolate wasteland. And I think it's very important that we all step up to do what we can to ensure our ecosystems are protected, and at least we have one space agency really addressing. We have at least one space agency that's at least doing everything that's necessary to track the plastic material and to get it out of the ocean. So, I mean, this is what we have to do in regards to fighting for a better future, and we have to really invest in our resources. So, other than that, guys, I want to make sure that we continue following this story, because if we can do something about that plastic landmass, it will help out, I guess, us as a species too.
It's a necessary component toward, getting this planet to be a little more self-sustaining and stop the ecocidal death march.
Yeah. I would just add on to it. I mean, I'm a big fan of the video, the hyper-viral video, the history of the world, I guess, and it's a big enough deal that he thought it would be worth including at the end of the video. Yeah. So this is something that's going to matter, and sadly, a lot of fish are going to die in the process. A lot of food that's going to be eaten that is fish is going to have plastic, so we're just going to eat it right back. I mean, it's going to hurt us. Plastic in the ocean is going to hurt us in one of a dozen ways, so let's stop it.
Yeah. All right, guys. So other than that, we're going to move on to another story that's very important, and that has to deal with Venezuela walking away from the OAS. Can you tell us, Paul, what exactly is happening?
All right, so the OAS is the Organization of American States. It's sort of like a UN for the Western Hemisphere. So it's comprised of dozens of nations in North and South America. The United States has an ambassador to the OAS. So recently the OAS recognized Juan Guaido's representative, a guy named Gustave Tarre, as the representative from Venezuela. And so this is a problem because Juan Guaido is not the elected president of Venezuela and is not entitled to send ambassadors to an international body to represent Venezuela. So the current representative from the actual government of Venezuela obviously protested this measure. 5 of the 18 countries that voted for the U.S. measure, so the U.S. introduced this measure to the OAS. So 5 of the 18 countries that voted for the U.S. measure were recently taken over by pro-IMF governments. So this is, again, to a point that we were making earlier, that a lot of the pressure that the United States is putting on Venezuela is coming vicariously through independent organizations, independent financial institutions that are independent but are extremely favorable to the United States interests. Even places like Haiti ended up voting for the measure in order to attempt to appease the United States and Washington, because they were embroiled in their own economic warfare against the United States, centering around Petrocalibre alliance, which is another story altogether. This also comes in the wake of Facebook silencing hundreds of accounts that are associated with the Venezuelan government in what apparently is an attempt to shape the overall messaging around Venezuela. So according to Facebook's head of cybersecurity, Nathaniel Gletcher, 764 accounts located in Venezuela were banned, and another 1,196 accounts which appear to be engaged in state-backed influence campaign in Venezuela were also shuttered. So if you're in favor of Venezuela, you're not allowed to talk about it publicly to an international audience. No. You know, we only want to hear from the United States aligned sources that are favorable to the Juan Guaido faux government. That's that. The OAS, though, is explicitly breaking its own charter rules in doing so. So the OAS charter says that it is to promote members' solidarity, to strengthen their collaboration, and to defend their sovereignty, their territorial integrity, and their independence. So the OAS branch that voted to admit Tare, known as the Permanent Council, which is sort of the equivalent to the UN Security Council, is charged with keeping the vigilance over the maintenance of friendly relations among member states. So this decision clearly to recognize a faux government's appointee, a faux administration to a government's appointee to this international body, disrespects that country's actual sovereignty and undermines any solidarity that you have with that country in favor of another member state's position toward that country. So the U.S. ambassador to the OAS is a guy named Carlos Trujillo, and he was pressed to provide any legal justification for the United States introducing this measure to recognize Juan Guaido's appointee to the OAS as the official appointee, and he's unable to do so, and instead is basically just citing that he's who we recognize. So there's no real legal justification for this. So also need to point out that this guy Tare was implicated in a plot to assassinate President Maduro, the drone plot in 2016. So this is one of those, they will come back to you and say, oh, well, you're jailing dissidents, or you're preventing political speech because it's political speech. And it's like, no, we're jailing people who attempted to assassinate the president. That's reasonable. That is a reasonable thing. So the end result of all of this is Venezuela has withdrawn itself from the OAS completely, which is, again, entirely reasonable. This is not a state being obstinate because they have disagreements with a foreign body. This is a foreign body saying, we don't recognize your sovereignty, we don't recognize your government, and we don't recognize your ambassador. Instead, we've decided to recognize a person who is attempting to commit a coup in your country and the faux ambassador that he's appointing. That's who we recognize. So this is a sovereign government saying, you don't recognize us, we're out. End of story.
Yeah.
Thoughts, guys?
Yeah, I have a few thoughts on this. It's showing that our constant intervention in Venezuela is going to lead to more destabilization, especially for the people in Venezuela. Already internationally, Venezuela is fighting against the Titan. That's the United States policy, and it's been reported. It's a fact that Venezuela has more oil than Saudi Arabia, and currently, there's a lot of influence of the large fossil fuel industries that are in the United States that want to have control over that oil. But for a long time, it's always been denied, especially to U.S. policymakers as well as to the fossil fuel lobby groups here in America, and they're willing to do whatever it takes to continue the destabilization in Venezuela, and more importantly, it's the American taxpayer that's going to pay for it. This is nuts. We would be outraged if some foreign country was doing this to us, or they were telling us how we should run our government, or who our ambassadors are. We wouldn't like this if any country was doing this to the United States. But for some reason, a lot of Americans are just turning a blind eye to what's happening in Venezuela. Yeah, you can be critical of their type of government or whoever their leader is, but if you are going to promote the destabilization of a legitimate government and then interfere in that said country's political affairs, I know that you wouldn't like it if somebody did that to you.
Yeah, aren't you guys screaming that Russia hacked our elections and stuff constantly? Oh, a foreign government's interfering in our political process. What are we doing? Yeah. What is this?
So I think that there's another portion to this which isn't talked about in how this is happening. And that is a version of bigger army diplomacy, bigger economy diplomacy, bigger money diplomacy, where we hear about fake news all the time and all these different issues. The U.S. is literally trying to materialize a government that doesn't exist into power, and pretending that a government that is in power doesn't have any power and should be ignored. You can't do that unless you are the U.S. and they are Venezuela. You couldn't. The U.S. would never get away with doing this to any of the G20 countries. You can't just pretend a government doesn't exist and then use your weight and might and economy and military to make everyone else just nod in agreement. This is doublespeak. This is country-sized doublespeak. This is something that the U.S. would never accept happening to it. Like what you said before in previous episodes, it's as if Nancy Pelosi went right in front of Washington or the White House, and then China said, yeah, she's the president, and then all the other countries in the world started pretending that Nancy Pelosi was the president of the United States. It wouldn't work out. It couldn't work out. But when there aren't a lot of journalists that go into these places anymore, I mean, there's a few people. There's like maybe 3 independent news organizations that don't have a big budget that are counteracting everything. They happen to be the only people that are on the ground. And then you have, and this is very similar to what we have in all the other countries that we've invaded. Where are the journalists? I thought journalists are important to be embedded journalists, etc., except we're not. Instead, what is happening is the mainstream media is parroting what the government says, pretending like it is always accurate. Remember, the media supposedly hates Trump. They just listen to everything he says. So when we get to this point where we're literally acting like a government doesn't exist, it's beyond even, well, how would you like it if it was done to you? This is, how would you like it if your culture, your way of life, your government, the people that are in government, their lives, what mattered, how they got there, just didn't mean anything to the rest of the world because a bigger country said it should be ignored.
Well, the problem is that we have a media that's also infatuated with war. Yeah. They love war no matter what it takes. And the cost of it, they don't care about it. They don't care about the cost of human lives. Let's just rewind back the clocks when Trump ordered the bombing in Syria. You had anchors on MSNBC, for example, saying, look at those big, beautiful rockets going up in the air. What they didn't show you was those big, beautiful rockets landing on homes and communities and people being impacted by the debris from the rockets, the blast area of the rockets. And think about what happens if there's a potential escalation of force in Venezuela. Are U.S. forces going to be bombing communities in Venezuela? I mean, that could potentially happen. Will there be some sort of military coup? And if it's not going to be U.S. forces, will it be a backed U.S. military militia of Venezuelan supporters of the faux government that we are supporting?
I think they've made it clear that they don't want it to be a U.S.-backed hot war. They want to try and distance themselves rhetorically from it by arming the opposition groups and engaging in economic warfare and trying to basically, to use a poker analogy, just lean on their chip advantage.
Yeah.
Right? That's exactly what's going on. I wanted to point out, before we get too much further, that there are a couple of excellent sources to look at for actual legit on-the-ground reporting that's going on in Venezuela. Please check out the Gray Zone Project, which is a Max Blumenthal project. Hey, is that right? Max Blumenthal? Am I mixing him up with... Yeah, Max Blumenthal. Also, the Jimmy Dore Show has done excellent reporting on Venezuela, and I also want to point out somebody that they've had on their show, who's an excellent reporter and was also an excellent reporter when it came to Syria and now is on the ground in Venezuela, is Canadian reporter Eva Bartlett. Check her out on Twitter. Excellent on-the-ground reporting coming out of Venezuela.
Don't forget Abby Martin as well.
Also Abby Martin,
Abby Martin has done a lot of extensive research, and RT America as well.
Also, it's important to mention that since Venezuela is out of money, what hasn't been mentioned, very similar to how what happened with Iran, is that Venezuela sent a huge amount of oil to be refined, and the U.S. is like, well, we're just not going to pay you. So a lot of this there's a lot of things are happening. We can discuss what's the balance of how much corruption, how much is the leader of Venezuela not doing a good job, how much is outside. But what we do know is, just like Iran, they're holding their money hostage, so they can't even fix the things that are broken. They're blockading, they're doing economic sanctions, and then as we know, economic sanctions are just warfare in another name. And so people are starving because they can't get food, and these things are falling apart. And so the U.S. is
Daniel, how's freedom supposed to come to Venezuela? Do handshakes and high fives? I don't fucking think so.
I mean, the point with Venezuela is, will Venezuela hold out? How long will they hold out? How much will Russia involve themselves? Cuba and Venezuela are already having issues because of the blockades. And again, this all goes back to, we still haven't let go of the Monroe Doctrine. This is still the U.S. acting like it owns America, all of America, both continents.
Yeah. So I wanted to point out a great chat here from A Dingo Ate Me Baby.
I'm very sorry about that again.
Yeah, sorry about your baby. Great screen name. They just arrested an Assange associate in Ecuador. They charged him with trying to blackmail Maduro. That's interesting. I will have to look more closely at that.
I'd love to see if they have blackmailing the head of state in that. That'd be quite interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would be interesting to see, and we'll definitely follow through with that story. But now we got to move on to a local story here in the United States. And Daniel, it's really disturbing to really talk about this. And
it's actually in Britain.
Oh, is it Britain?
Yeah.
Oh, it's in Britain. All right, never mind. Disregard that. So Daniel, at least kind of give us an idea what happened to this individual, because I think a lot of people need to know who's responsible for just allowing her murder to happen.
Yeah. So this is about a woman named Shauna Grice in the UK. She's a 19-year-old. She had an ex-boyfriend who was stalking her severely. Had a stolen copy of her house key, would peer into her window while she was sleeping, would tail her when she was driving around or using public transit or walking. And where this story starts, in terms of why we're covering this, is she went to the police and she said, "This guy is stalking me. It's an issue. Can you do something about it?" And the police, instead of helping get a restraining order, taking her story seriously, fined her for annoying them. And, because no one likes to be told, I guess, by a woman that she's being stalked. We couldn't put the effort into it. So they didn't. They fined her. They treated her like a criminal for trying to report this guy. And he slit her throat, the guy, not the police. Can never tell these days. Slit her throat, lit her bedroom on fire. And so we're going to go, the two officers that were supposed to be handling that case had retired since they actually may face disciplinary action. Remember, this is not the U.S. Police in the UK are actually held in line quite a bit. So I'm going to kind of get into a little bit about that. Obviously the police have come out and said, we're terribly sorry we let this person get murdered, and fined her for trying to get us to stop it. We're, our bad. And of course the parents are not that happy about it. They don't think that kind of they should get any thanks or anything, because they let someone kill their daughter because they didn't take it seriously. Now, what I think is interesting about this is there's a lot of things that caught my eye in this story. First is obviously the breakdown of the police structure, but since it's the UK, it was also very interesting that the police seemed more apologetic about this case than I've seen police when their officers shoot up a family. When police in America kill an entire family, kill someone that doesn't have a gun, all we get is, wasn't our fault, we followed the rules, everything's good, don't worry about it. We did everything, we were 5% scared, so we took out the family, we followed doctrine, we have no more comment, we have pending litigation, and then maybe we'll see a lawsuit and a settlement that comes after it. Whereas here, at least the police are like, oh, we really screwed up, we might put these guys under discipline, we're going to investigate it, and we're going to reform. I'm not sure how much of that is going to actually pan out in the end, but it's just kind of interesting that how when police agencies fuck up, the difference and just their wording. And because in this, imagine if this happened in the U.S., this happened in a low-income area, they would have never, no one would even cared to begin with, because it's just so common for this kind of thing to happen, for police to do nothing about it. Probably would have not even gotten covered like it would in the U.K. Because in the U.K., if a police officer kills someone, the entire country protests, because it's so rare, because they never kill anyone. So I just thought it was an interesting juxtaposition on all these different points.
So here's the question, though, is if it happened in this way in the U.S., do you think it's likely that the police department would be as apologetic?
I don't think they would say anything. I don't think anyone would care.
Well, there's a lot of look. There's a lot of concerns about our police department here in the United States. I mean, there's a lot of corruption. There's a lot of lack of accountability. I'm surprised that this happened in London. I mean, or Britain, to be more precise.
I think it was in Brighton specifically.
Yeah. All right, thank you for the correction on that one. But I think it's very important that when we look at stories like this, we have to really hold all police agencies accountable. They're designed to protect and serve. And when a citizen makes a complaint, especially about a hostile stalker or somebody who's trying to physically hurt them, it is their job to make sure that that said individual is protected, and that whoever's going to cause any harm is held accountable, or at least there are laws put in place to make sure that that person is away from that individual, the victim. But it's like, but in regards to being apologetic, if something like this happened here in the United States, I mean, it really depends on the region too. Like
if it's a wealthy white girl that's targeted, we know it would get covered. If it's a poor black girl or Hispanic or any other minority, we know it wouldn't. Another thing that I want to get into this is that, how do I put this? Police. Actually, someone take over.
So I have a point that I want to make on this, and it's less that, oh, well, if it was a wealthy white lady, they would respond to it, and if it was a poor minority, you wouldn't hear anything about it. I think it goes deeper than that. The creation of the police in any country, the United States as well, the creation of the police comes after there are major protests against a major capital owner, someone who owns a factory or a means of production. Prior to institutionalized, government-controlled, state-controlled police departments, a lot of companies with large-scale industries would hire their own, basically, sort of militia group. Think the Pinkertons, right? We didn't have police departments early on in this country. We didn't have police departments early on in Western society. It's only after you have large institutions that generate profit and employ people that give poor conditions to the people that they're employing, and the employees stand up and say, this isn't right. Now that company needs to get those workers in line. When they say they're here to protect and to serve, who are they here to protect and serve? Police departments are here to protect and serve capital owners who own and operate the means of production. That's why they were created. That's what they're here for. And so when an individual says, I have a credible threat against my life, I have this stalker, please help me, police, you're here to protect and serve me, they're saying, well, you don't really pay a whole lot of my bills. I'm here to really do the bidding of, the state and of the various institutions and capital producers that we protect. You're not one of those, so super low priority, too bad for you. And then something like this happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're at this point in history where this kind of stuff happens. It's just so interesting where we're at. I mean, exactly what Paul said. It goes into even the term protect and serve that we see on every single squad car in the U.S. It's not a legal thing. It's a slogan. It's a catchphrase. It's branding. It's marketing. And in the U.K., even though their police are better, they don't shoot people to death because they're 5% scared, and they don't just shoot people because they're scared, and they don't walk up to people with their guns drawn. It still happens. This is a systemic thing. Just like Paul said, it breaks down in such a way that they're not really there. The police aren't there to protect and serve. They're there to protect and serve capital.
Yeah. And it's very tragic because, unfortunately, an innocent life was lost. And I guess we got to learn from the mistakes. But, I mean, how often does this happen? And how often is this talked about?
And to go into a little more into that macro talk, how many police have stopped school shooters? And I want to say that there are more police now who have hidden outside of schools while shootings have happened because they're terrified for their own lives than had actually stopped shootings. So that's,
I think the number of police who have actively stopped mass shootings is a grand total of zero.
It's zero.
Yeah.
But the number of children that have been arrested and put into juvenile detention that are in school is about 1 million.
Yeah. And see, there must be reform. There must be accountability. But, I mean, again, the only way we're going to do it is if citizens themselves step up and demand their elected officials to take action too. But that's
you got to take over the government. You have to win before you can win. Then you can win.
Absolutely. So moving on to probably a much better story, to where you see students, college students, actually stepping up and demanding change from their institution. And after reading the story just a couple times, again, really impressed with the student body of Georgetown University. So just to kind of give you guys a background, Georgetown University students in Washington, D.C. Have voted in favor of reparations fund to repay the descendants of slaves sold by the school in 1838. So just so you guys get an idea, this school is basically it's a former Jesuit. It was a former Jesuit institution, and basically, right now there's a creation of a reconciliation contribution fee of $27.20 each semester would benefit descendants of the 272 slaves. Or the descendants of the slaves that were sold those many years ago. So the undergraduate students passed the referendum with a 66% majority, but the measure still requires approval by the university, and Georgetown is the first major college to pass such a reparations fund. And right now there's a lot of talk about reparations, especially amongst the Democratic candidates, most notably Tulsi Gabbard, who's proposing a reparations fund bill or refund bill or like something like that.
I don't know the details of that particular bill.
But it's interesting right now that this is happening, and I think this is a really interesting step that these students are willing to take in regards to acknowledge something that was really horrific that happened at their school in 1838 and was a continued practice until the end of slavery after the Civil War. And the descendants of the 272 enslaved people, I mean, at least they're getting something back. And you're seeing students who have no relations with the people at the university or any other relations at all actually coming together and voting on a correct historical issue. So I kind of want to open the floor with you guys. I kind of want to get your thoughts and comments about the courage that these students have done. And really, what does it say about other college universities, too, and whether or not they'll do the same, and how much an issue this will play in regards to the 2020 presidential election cycle?
So I think that I'm going to really stick on that last point you made about the 2020, because the last time we brought up reparations was when we were talking about how the media is attacking Sanders for this perceived weakness on reparations. Sanders, when you ask Sanders what do you do about reparations, he's going to say, well, all these programs that I've made, we're going to have extra funds put to low-income minority locations, but we're going to rise all tides, rising tide lifts all boats, a mentality where it's like, okay, your reparations, now you get health care, now you get free college, now you get all these other things that everyone else gets, and that was being used to attack him by many other more established candidates who would say, I'm for reparations, but never defined it. And again, our video from that time was saying how if you don't define what reparations are, you're not saying anything. You're just taking a political advantage on a very, 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 very sad historic issue and playing a game with it because you don't really mean it. And so no one brought anything specific. So back then we were talking about how if you don't bring anything specific, it doesn't matter. This is specific. Right. These are students coming together, the student government, and saying, here's a problem. Here are the people that we're targeting to fix it. Here's why it's related to this college. Here's how we're going to pay for it. Here's who we're going to pay. And here's how we're going to do this. This is specific reparations, and I'm very happy that they did this, and I do hope that the university takes advantage of this and doesn't turn this down. Because if the university was to, after all this happened, after reporting this story, say that we're not going to deal with it because it's too X, Y, or Z, didn't want to.
Well,
that's going to be an issue.
I actually got a comment on it because there was two parts of the article that I forgot to mention. But in order to bring some historical context, just so you guys have an idea about where the university stands and what happened when it sold those 272 slaves during its founding. So, in 1838, the Jesuit university decided to sell slaves to plantations in Louisiana to pay off debts in a deal worth the equivalent of $3.3 million. So, I mean, again, a barbaric way to pay off a debt because those are human lives and individuals. But in 2017, the institution formally apologized for selling the 272 slaves and renamed the campus building after Isaac Hawkins, the first enslaved man listed in the 1838 sale. So, Georgetown University is aware of its past, and they, at least in 2017, they've made a formal apology. I think it's really important that the university leaders, the administration, really acknowledges what the student body voted for and that they pass it, because I think it's the right thing to do. I mean, if you're going to sell human beings to pay off debts, I think it's very important, if you're going to keep an educational institute, a free, a college-educated institute that's there to enlighten minds and to educate the next future leaders, you should step up and do the right thing, because reparations is being talked about. Now, there's one thing that's bothering me, though, at the end of this article, because it mentions Senator Cory Booker from New Jersey on Tuesday filed a bill to create a commission for studying reparation proposals, and then Senator Elizabeth Warren and Kamala Harris also expressed the same kind of study.
Bernie Sanders did as well.
Yeah, but I mean, with Tulsi Gabbard, at least she's actually proposing written bill. I mean, there's a difference, but I mean, like, look, enough with the studying. I think we kind of understand.
I kind of get why you would want to study, because there have been multiple different proposals of how to handle it. What is the right amount of money? Who are the right people to target with some kind of reparations bill? There's a lot of disagreement among how to adequately handle it, even amongst the most vociferous supporters of reparations. So I don't begrudge anyone for launching an investigation or exploratory committee into figuring out how should we do this, what is the best way to move forward with this, what is the way that adequately covers the intended purpose of reparations, and what is the most politically feasible way of getting that through. I don't necessarily begrudge anyone that. With regard to this particular action that this particular institution did, it's rhetorically excellent, right? So it's saying, listen, we are an institution that is aware of our history, is aware of the negative parts of our history, and want to proactively do something to make amends for that.
Right.
That's an excellent, I mean, no one can begrudge them that.
There is though an issue, though. So, like, a lot of the Democratic candidates are either adopting the idea of reparations or proposing a study of reparations, or really full in support of it. And of course, during the primary, each one's going to say, well, I'm better at it. I can do this. Do you think it will carry on into the general election? And what will it do during the general election? The second it hits
the general election, they're going to... That's my entire point, that Sanders at least is coming out and saying, look, I have a plan that's going to fix everyone, and that's what I'm sticking with. Because, again, reparations has a 30% approval rating, so it's a big hot potato issue. And again, to the point, I think that not many people are really that serious about it. I think that they're talking about it now because they're trying to court the African-American vote, and they think that, well, Sanders has these things locked down, so I'm going to do this thing, which happens to be reparations. I don't think they mean anything by it beyond what they're saying in a primary to get votes.
Can I tack on to that point, actually, as well? In a survey I was reading, and I wish I could cite this for you, I don't know it off the top of my head, but even among African-American voters, reparations only has like a 55% favorable view. So it's not, even amongst the most specific voting bloc that should have the highest opinion of this, it sort of has majority support, but kind of barely. It's not overwhelming.
20% of the population is not enough. But I also want to add into this that the other issue that I brought up last time, which I think is still fair, is the system that we live in is still a white supremacist system. So even if you give people money, a lot of people are going to get screwed out. I mean, again, you go back to after the Civil War, I believe it was like 40,000 acres or some huge amount of Georgia country was given to slaves who were not slaves anymore, who had, I believe, served in the Union Army. I could be wrong on exactly how they got there. And They gave them that land, and they were successfully using it. And then once the federal government was not that interested in dealing with or fighting the South, the state militias just came and burned everything down. You have one of the most prosperous African-American towns in history, which was in Tulsa. The Air Force, well, I don't think they were the Air Force quite then in World War I, would use it as bombing practice. There was, if you're familiar with the Emmett Till story, where a woman who recanted at the end of her life that he never actually whistled, we just killed him for nothing. There was a similar story where a white woman said that she was assaulted by a black man, so they just burned the entire city to the ground. So part of what I'm getting at is reparations are good, but if you can't continue to sustain and build them up, just like people have been able to settle in the suburbs, build up their home values, then they can send their kids to school, which allows them to have more education, which allows them to be more productive, which allows them to get bigger houses, and they can. That's the cycle. That's a cycle that's good, that's positive, that builds up over time. But if, as an example, no one's taken more wealth in terms of who was president than Obama from African Americans, because he was there and presided over the 2008 collapse, which, of course, because of the ninja loans and all these other things,
so many people lost their homes.
Specifically, African Americans lost more value. I think they lost more value compared to whites. That they actually, about 100 years of progress was just wiped out like that because of 2008.
Well, see, that's not the first time either, because if you even look at the history of Detroit, especially after World War II, there was a lot of thriving African American communities.
Yeah.
And as soon as that was made aware, especially to those in the industry as well as in the state and local politics, federal politicians, there was a lot of crackdown on a lot of the major African American businesses. But there isn't.
If we can't get over, if we can't solve reparations alone, will just end in the exact same thing that it's always ended in: someone taking it away at a previous time and no one caring. You have to fix the system that makes it happen, and then when you fix it, you can do money infusion.
That's the point.
So there is actually one final comment I want to state in regards to this story, and it actually comes from the group chat Carbamos. Too bad Isaac Hawkins can't see the black students attending the school that sold him. Perhaps he would have felt less hopeless if he had been able to envision a better future for his descendants. And you know what? That's a fantastic note to end it on. And you know what? The history of slavery is a damning mark on the United States, especially as our revolution was based on the idea of individual freedom, the right to pursue happiness, liberty, and the ability to make a better life for yourself. And for a long time, even after we won our Revolutionary War, we still continued the practice of slavery. And finally now, people are actually talking about the impact that it had on our culture, and we're having a conversation about reparations.
Well,
and
we've had this conversation in the past.
We've had this conversation in the past, but I don't think it really held as much ground because, again, the system that we had was it's corrupt to the core.
Yeah, reparations right now, like I'm saying, is even the people that are saying that they're for it are using it for political purposes.
Yeah. And hopefully, I think we could tell which candidates are really more for it and would actually fight for it. But I mean, when it comes down to really having a political conversation, it's going to require citizens themselves to step up and really act.
Who before this fake attack on this schism, I should say, that's happening with Bernie Sanders, the news has just created of many things that they've created with him. How many people were talking about reparations before they started using it as a weakness? None. Yeah.
Because the reality is reparations can work if there is also systemic change, right? Reparations on their own is a Band-Aid for a flesh wound.
Yeah, and it's going to get cut again anyway, because again, whenever a community of African Americans in the U.S. get money, something terrible happens to the community.
Just look at the history of Detroit. In fact, there's a fantastic documentary, and it's skipping my mind right now, but it shows really the rise of African American communities in Detroit, especially with the auto industry, and really the amount of pushback that they got, and really what led to the deconstruction of Detroit. I mean, there's a lot of other factors happened, but I mean, the main communities that were affected the most by politicians really trying to cripple African American communities and small business owners, it was in Detroit, and they were really going after a lot of African American communities.
And again, I want to say again, the only place in America that got bombed in World War I was the U.S. bombing an African-American city, Tulsa, Oklahoma, which was known back then as Black Wall Street. It was the most successful one of the most successful
Yeah,
communities in the country.
there were small business owners. There were thriving community leaders.
A dollar I think would circulate 100 times before it would leave, whereas now, and this actually was very funny, that's connecting to Killer Mike and his thing on Netflix.
Oh, by the way, watch that documentary.
It's very good.
It's like 6 cents now.
It's like, no, it's not even 6 cents. It's that a dollar will stay in the African American community for like 30 minutes or something like that.
Oh, it's a time. It's a measure of time. Yeah.
It's how long it stays there. Because if it circulates, it can continue to rebound. But that's what I'm saying. You can't fix one. If you can't fix the system, if a machine is broken fundamentally by design, throwing time and elbow grease isn't going to fix it. You have to make a new machine.
Yeah. And that's the only way, again, people are going to have that better future is if we get involved. We got to have conversations. We've got to get politically involved in this system. The system won't change unless we step up and fight for a better future. And speaking of change, we're going to talk about the prison industrial complex and really the people who are impacted the most by our prison policies. In the United States, in case you don't live here, because I know we have a few international people who live overseas or right above in Canada, if you're in jail, you lose the privilege to vote, and that's sadly the United States is the most heavily incarcerated, has the most heavily incarcerated population in the free world. We have more prisons and schools, and it's really impacting a lot of communities, and it prohibits people to be actively involved in our political system. And Senator Bernie Sanders seems to be leading the charge in changing that narrative. So, Daniel, what's going on?
So this ties right into the previous story that we did about reparations and the systemic change that's required. This is a systemic change. This makes things different because right now, actually with the exception of Vermont and Maine, if you're in prison, you lose your right to vote, and in a majority, or let me see, in 22 states, you lose your right to vote after you get out of prison as well. And then in other states, you just permanently lose your right to vote. There's, I remember when Rick Scott was in charge of Florida, he would oversee a board that people that had felony convictions, the only place that they can go to get their right to vote back, and he would just kind of laugh at them and piss off. Even if they reform their life, they own a small business, they employ people, haha, you don't get to vote, you don't matter. And of course we know which groups that this specifically affects the most. So with this, Sanders was at a town hall and he was asked about this, and he said, again, since it is his own state, I'm sure it had something to do with that, where if you're in jail you can still vote. He said, yeah, if you're in jail, you've done something terrible, but you shouldn't lose what it means to be a citizen in a democracy, and you should be able to vote. So he has argued that, remember, 1% of Americans are in prison. That's a pretty big voting bloc, except they can't vote. And so politicians don't care about them. So if you're in prison, no one cares about you. Politicians don't care about you. The system doesn't care about you because you have no value. But if prisoners had the right to vote, well, perhaps there might be some better conditions coming along because now they're a voting bloc, and they probably don't have a lot else to do but vote on voting day. So I think this is very good. I think this is a good step that we should be doing. Everyone should. You're a citizen. You should be able to vote, no matter what your circumstances.
There's something else I want to add on to this. Look, we always talk on this show that, look, no one's perfect. The people who we were 10 years ago are not the people who we are now. We all change, and some of us start off bad, and we make an effort to be better. I mean, that's the whole idea of the human journey.
That's
to be
the
better.
definition of progress.
Yes, and the thing is, look, we have crazy criminal laws here in this country, and the most people who are impacted by it the most are the victims of the war on drugs. You have individuals who are holding a bag of cannabis. They're sentenced to jail for either 10 to 20 years, and then when they get out, they lose a lot of privilege. Time goes on without them, and they lose the privilege to vote. And granted, there are other people who do get out early, serving 5 years. I mean, look, again, sentencing is different for every individual, but for the individuals who get out and can still have time to reform themselves, they're up against a huge mountain of
you lose
of
about
laws.
3,000 rights when you were a felon.
And the problem is that, what if that person changes their life around? I mean, you're losing potential. You're losing a chance for someone to contribute to society. And you know what? Their vote matters because maybe they do want to get politically involved. Maybe they want to make sure no one else gets put into the system that they're put in. And maybe they hear a candidate or a politician that's talking about fixing schools, fixing the community, making better jobs, more livable wages, a better infrastructure, better healthcare plan, and they say, well, that's somebody who I like to support, but then all of a sudden, surprise, surprise, they can't vote. Does that sound like a democracy to you?
Right.
I mean, we just can't throw people away just because they made a mistake. Now, look, there are individuals who do commit crime, like murder or rape, and look, please keep them away from society, or at least somehow try and rehabilitate them. There we go.
That's the word.
That's the word. But I mean, for those individuals who are at least are the victims of the war on drugs for holding bags of cannabis, give them another chance. Let them have a chance to reform, because you have people in jail for committing crimes that don't really hurt anybody. And it's ridiculous. So, Paul, go ahead.
Your core point there is excellent, and that is, if you are in prison for a crime that you don't think should be a crime, that you're morally opposed to, how are you then able to vote to put someone in power to get rid of that law or to change that law? The other point that I really wanted to make is, when we were talking about this story before we came on the air, sort of engaged in a thought experiment of, well, okay, is there any circumstance by which the right to vote should be removed from someone, right? Is there any circumstance by which, and so I thought, well, okay, well, clinically insane, well, that's problematic, because, what if someone is declared insane that later it turns out that they aren't? There are cases of that happening.
And that's happened before in the past.
Right. And I think what we've come to is, no matter what metric you say is, well, this is a specific corner case where we shouldn't allow this person to vote, that can often be expanded and used nefariously to prevent other people to vote. So I think the principled position should be all citizens of a country of voting age are allowed to vote, regardless of past conviction records or past felony status or anything. There should be no reason that you should remove someone's right to vote.
I want to add more onto that. I mean, look, the minute you say that this one group or set individuals or people who politically think different than you do not have the right to vote, you are contributing to the death of democracy.
Right, that's voter suppression.
Yeah, because the idea of democracy is that everyone gets involved. Now, look, you're always going to run into people that you will disagree with, and who has different political opinions than you. Look, we've interviewed a lot of people on the show in the past, from socialists, Greens, Democrats, and even the libertarians. But never would I support an idea that none of them should have the right to vote. And same thing for prisoners, too. And especially, look, you know our opinion was the war on drugs. It's a ridiculous war. Prohibition never works. And you have the majority of the prison population are impacted by that war. They should have a right to vote and actually be asked really what they think about the war on drugs, and the ridiculous times that they're serving in jail. We need to hear their voices. Who knows who we're losing in regards to what they can contribute to society. Give them a chance to rehabilitate themselves. There we go, and to contribute to society and be a part of the democratic process. This is what the whole idea of America is about, right? This is what the whole revolution was about, so that people can make themselves better. No one's going to be perfect. Everyone has made mistakes, but that doesn't mean that we should not deny them the chance to have a second opportunity to make their lives better and also contribute to a better society.
Yeah,
Daniel.
I just want to add on to this that, America has so many people in jail. I mean, it's millions of people.
We're number one.
We're number one. Millions of people don't have rights that other people have. I mean, this isn't what we're discussing is a joke in other nations. They would say, "Are you serious?" I think someone even commented earlier in chat. I thought it was a joke when I first heard you couldn't vote if you were in jail. Exactly. So
welcome to the United
States. To get to that point, so we wind up. Go back to the system that makes this happen. You are in an area that doesn't have jobs, where youth unemployment is 50%. No one's investing in you. Politicians don't care about you. Your money's being extracted from your area. There's really no place you can go to vote. Your school is terrible, so it's very hard to learn. You're also very hungry when you go to school, since your parents can't bring in enough money at their minimum wage jobs to feed you. So to supplement your income, you join a gang. Or because you feel threatened, you join a gang. And then you get into that in many ways because that's the only option you had. You then get arrested for carrying cannabis. You're now also a gang member, which has a terrible stigma. We've scarlet lettered the entire idea of what it means to be a criminal. We take people that are in circumstances, for the most part, that are beyond their control, and we treat them as if they've chosen every step along the way, and then blame them and dehumanize them and treat them like animals for those situations. So then we as a population can sit back and say, just keep them away from me. I don't care about them. Get them out of here. Get them out of my town, not in my backyard. And so they get shipped away to someplace where they're not growing at all. We've taken away all the educational aspects of school that used to be in jail to actually rehabilitate, because since the war on drugs has happened, since we have this way that we've looked at the police for the past 30 or 40 years, it happens, the obvious inputs of the system and the laws lead to obvious outputs. So now we have a private prison system that makes money off of slave labor at a population larger than the actual number of slaves in America, and pays them a nickel an hour, puts them on fire brigades because California doesn't want to have to pay to have people carry around hoses, and they'll do it because it's so terrible in prison that the fresh air and maybe dying of fire is better by comparison. But remember, when you get out of jail, you're a felon, so you can't get that EMT license you need to be a firefighter, which you now have experience for. This is the systemic destruction that causes people that go into jail to become worse, when it should be a system like in Europe and Norway, as an example, where we try to make people better and bring them back into the productive area of society. We don't penalize them after they get out. When they
I don't think anyone can reasonably make the argument that the American prison system is rehabilitative in nature.
No,
I don't think
punitive.
you can. It is entirely 100% punitive.
And there's another thing too.
And exploitative.
And there's another thing too that I want to let our international audience know. Just so you know, the prison industrial complex has a lot of influence in Washington, D.C., thanks to Citizens United, because let's face it, these prison industrial complexes are businesses and corporations are people, and money is speech. And so to our national audience, if you want to do something about it, let's actually talk about getting money out of politics. Now, there's a few organizations doing that. Wolfpack, Represent Us. But I mean, if we're going to have a fair democracy, if we want to get rid of all the lobby groups, including the prison industrial complex, we've got to get rid of Citizens United and the McCutcheon's decision. And this was brought to you by the geniuses in the Supreme Court. So this is why we have this fucked up system in the first place, and we got to get rid of the war on drugs. And at least kudos to Bernie Sanders for at least stepping up and saying, like, look, give these prisoners the chance to vote. People have a right to change themselves, and if they're going to make themselves better, give them a chance and let them have the privilege to vote. This is what this whole country's about, right? Or am I wrong?
Taxation without representation.
Here's the question that we have. Do we believe in the idea of progress in this country? If we don't, then the system that we have should be quite adequate, where people that are bad are always bad, and people that are good are only good until they're bad. If we want to look at things in a medieval landscape, let's just get a time machine and send us back to Europe with serfdom, where people were slaves to the land. This is backwards, ancient, backwards thinking that doesn't hold water. It doesn't believe in the idea of human progress.
Yeah. I have to say something though. We got a super chat from Hank Kershaw. Thank you for the super chat. Should we deduce from Rokana's statement that Assange is not a journalist that this is Bernie's actual position? Bernie's silence is deafening. We will talk about Julian Assange right after this break, so I want to actually segue into this. We have a very uplifting story. We always talk about change and people getting politically involved. So this is a story, a short interview by conducted by me towards Andre Vasquez of the 40th Ward. He defeated O'Connor, who was alderman of the 40th Ward for 30 plus years. Super corrupt to the core. The reason why Chicago is corrupt is because O'Connor was really contributing to the corruption in Chicago politics.
That's part of why we're corrupt. He's not the sole.
Yeah. Well, he's one of the one of the main factors.
Gotcha.
But
he's affiliated with DSA. He's one of the people that now after this election, 10% of Chicago is represented by people affiliated or part of DSA. So what we're going to be doing for this break is we're going to be showing about 5 minutes of the interview. If you really like it, it's on our page, so you can find it very quickly by looking through our videos. But this is us basically congratulating. This is a victory. We're talking about all these terrible things that are happening in the rest of the show. This is someone who beat someone who was entrenched in power for over 30 years.
And had the Democratic machine backing him up. If you guys want to know about the
racist, did so many different things over his tenure, and he got taken down.
Yeah, and if you guys want to know...
this is for Carib Moth, right? Who's always asking for more uplifting stories.
This was inspired by you.
So this is my short interview with Andre Vasquez. The full interview is up on the Heartlands Media YouTube page. Please check out the full interview. There's also links to 3 previous other interviews that we did with Andre Vasquez. He's come a long way since he's been on our show when we were on the radio, and it's really uplifting to see him elected into office and bringing potential change to the city of Chicago. Peace, everyone. Hey everyone, this is Kit Cabello with Hardlens Media, and we have a very special interview with all of you. This is a follow-up interview now with Alderman-elect Andre Vasquez. He represents the 40th Ward, and first time he was on our show was as an activist, other 2 times as a candidate, and now finally as the Alderman-elect. Andre Vasquez, thank you so much for allowing us to do this interview with you. I know you got a busy schedule. There's a lot of things you're working on, so first, from everyone at Heartlands Media, thank you, and congratulations on your major win.
No, thank you. Thank you all for just being a part of the journey here. So it's really cool to catalog all the different steps. So yeah, I look forward to this conversation.
Now, of course, now that you replaced O'Connor, who's been in office for almost 30-plus years in Chicago politics, it's quite clear that the people, at least the community in the 40th Ward, wanted change. So for our viewers and subscribers who live outside of Chicago, can you at least give us at least a rundown of really what you were really up against in regards to facing O'Connor and really trying to flip the 40th Ward to be more progressive?
Yeah, I mean, I think the aldermanic role is very complicated. Right, so it's not necessarily that the ward got more progressive or less. It's that the role itself is so multi-layered that part of it is constituent services, part of it is establishing economic development. So, to be completely fair, we got 54%, so it wasn't a complete blowout. What we were up against was incredibly, it was a behemoth, right? So we were talking charter money, Rahm Emanuel money, developer money, ground game from establishment. That part was very difficult. So I don't think that, like I said, I believe the neighbors wanted change overall. And we were able to make the case that not only could we bring more progressive change to the city, but that we were able to also provide constituent services and can maintain and improve that as well.
Now, now that you're the alderman-elect of the 40th Ward, for our viewers and subscribers, when will be the day when you finally step into office and O'Connor's last day in Chicago politics?
Yeah, so I'll be sworn in on May 20th. Yeah, so we've got about a month, a little bit over a month until that time.
Right now, as it currently stands right now, the old city council, as well as its old mayor, Mayor Rahm Emanuel, are still passing some forms of legislation and policies. So, essentially, what concerns you right now, and in regards to what policies O'Connor may support? Because he has a lot of connections with the establishment, as well as a lot of large real estate developers here in Chicago that are gentrifying a lot of communities.
Yeah, I mean, I think the things that I'm concerned about are the same things we were concerned about campaigning, right? So it's a general philosophy about government and the role that large corporations and developers play. That will not change. I think out of respect for the role, May 20th is the day I start. So although I can be concerned about certain things, there's really not much to be done up until we get in there, till I figure out the dynamics of the council, how to build relationships. So overall, it's the same message and the same thing we're fighting against, the influence of the big money, the corruption that's so pervasive in the council. But I don't know that anything between now and the 20th changes it more than it already has, right? Like the mega TIF deals went through. We just have to figure out once I'm in, how we work to stem the flow of that big money influencing everything.
Now, what's really historic about the election on April 2nd was, and a lot of people don't even realize this, that DSA won some significant seats. About 10% of the city council is now associated or was endorsed by Democratic Socialists of America, the Chicago branch. So what does it really say about how people are viewing that organization, and what does it potentially say about any form of pushback against the Democratic machine now they know that DSA and other progressive groups are gaining ground in different seats of power all across the country?
So I think democratic socialism is something that there's a lot of generational reference to, and I think we haven't really been comfortable talking about it up until the point when Bernie showed up. So I think we also have to be very honest about how different people got to office. I think obviously having the amount of socialists that are coming in is amazing, but it did take coalitions to actually win these fights. So it took, Reclaim Chicago, United Working Families, all the unions. So I think the one that's getting a lot of headlines is the fact that we're democratic socialists.
All right, welcome back. That was just a short segment of my interview with 40th Ward Alderman-elect Andre Vasquez. All the best to him on his time now as the Alderman of the 40th Ward. We really hope you bring in much needed change, and thank you again for having a exclusive interview with us. We really appreciate the time that you took out of your day. He has a very busy schedule, so
he has to clean up 30 years of mess.
Yeah. So boy oh boy does he have a lot of work ahead of him. But people, the 40th Ward, help him out because he needs you there to support him, and don't back away, don't step down. Just because he's won doesn't mean the fight's over. It's only beginning. So a huge shout out to Hank Kerschel from our super chat. You gave us $6.67. Thank you so much. Does everyone know that if you do the super chat, the money sign down below, that they read your post on the show and it helps support this great channel? Man, that is the most factually accurate, scientific, truthful comment in human history ever, period. Please help out Hardlens Media. Your support is the main heart and backbone to everything that we do. We have a Patreon page. Every donation that you guys give us helps us get better gear so that we can make better content. Eventually, we want to get a much more professional studio location so we can make more of a weekly show, Monday through Friday. I mean, that's the main goal. That's the main dream. We want to go out there and do more investigative journalism. We've been in Indiana. We've been in Wisconsin. We've covered a lot of stories here in Chicago about corruption, and we want to get back to it. We just need the support, and what you guys are doing for this YouTube channel. Already we're now past 6,000 subscribers.
It's amazing.
You guys are helping us, and we can't thank you enough. So if you can't support us on Patreon, please subscribe. Make sure you hit that ring bell notification. It's really helping our channel out.
If you can't, and again, if it's, we know that a lot of people, simply because of this economy, don't have the funds to do it. So if you could just let your friends know we exist, share these videos around, anything to help us reach more audience is going to allow us, and this message that you guys support, and thank you for supporting it, to reach more people, which is going to make people think different things. And people thinking different things is going to cause them to act differently, and then maybe they'll act more politically. And so then the point that we're at now, even with Bernie Sanders, that happened because we had alternate media online.
Yeah.
So the more power that independent media can get, the more we can affect and the more power we can take away from corporate media.
Yeah. And I think one final note is that, we've come a long way since we did this YouTube channel, and we've done a lot of interviews in the past. You just scroll back, we've interviewed libertarians, Greens, socialists, Democrats,
anyone
community activists.
Anyone that has a voice that needs to speak.
And, we want to go back to that. We want to build this show, but it's, again, viewers and subscribers like you that are helping us grow this channel. So
I mean, to be completely real, like, most of this channel's history has been us interviewing people, but we didn't have this big national show that we're doing right now. So we had a few hundred, a few thousand subscribers, and now that we're at a point where we're building, we're excited to get to the point where we can have a real studio with other people. We can host nonprofits that are throughout the city, really have a much better conversation, but also, like Kit said, to get back on the field and talk to people again. That was always fun.
That's been a lot of fun. And again, Hank Kerschel, most factually accurate scientific comment in human history, period, ever. No argument, no debate. So, speaking of arguments, because I'm going to get angry now, this is a story about Bernie Sanders and our good friends at the Washington Post.
Oh, yeah.
And guess what they're going to talk about, guys?
I'm sure really accurate things that have no bias whatsoever.
Oh boy, my God! So I'm gonna probably get angry reading this article because it's from the Washington Post, and there's actually a comment on a much more earlier live stream that I did where I said out loud, I don't want to read this anymore because it's from the Washington Post, and there's gonna get a point where I just want to rip this thing up, but I'm not gonna do that.
Yeah, you're not ripping things up.
You have your ripping quota ends next month.
I know. So the title is "Inside the Russian Effort to Target Sanders Supporters and Help Elect Trump." The corporate media will not let go of Russiagate. I'm going to say this again. Russiagate was nothing but a conspiracy. 2.5 years were wasted wasted on trying to hoping on a hope to impeach Trump. That was never going to happen. The evidence is showing that he had no ties, no collusion with Russia. And, we're now seeing the consequences of it, where we're seeing his administration become more hostile towards Russia and also really be critical of the media, because now the media has lost its talking point. The media wasted all of its time, and even some independent media outlets, too, wasted their time talking about Russiagate, a conspiracy theory that had no evidence behind it. Personally, I think it was a waste of time, but here's what this article is saying. So they're going back to 2016. And just a quick reminder, even though Bernie Sanders, the nomination was stolen from him, he still helped out Hillary Clinton, which is something that still irks me to this day. But after Bernie Sanders lost his presidential primary against Hillary Clinton in 2016, remember, lost, a Twitter account called Red Louisiana News reached out to his supporters to help sway the general election. Conscious Bernie Sanders supporters are already moving towards the best candidate, Trump! ! Hashtag feel the burn, hashtag vote Trump 2016, the account tweeted. The tweet was not actually from Louisiana, according to analysis from Clemson University researchers. Instead, it was one of the thousands of accounts identified as based in Russia, part of a cloaked effort to persuade supporters of the senator from Vermont to elect Trump. Bernie Sanders says his message resonates with Republicans, said another Russian tweet. Again, proof, evidence. Where's the solid evidence? This is from a research, or is this like another biased research attempt? All right, and so now, so here's another thing from the article. While much attention was focused on the question on whether the Trump campaign encouraged or conspired with Russia, they're not going to let that go. That's so fucking disgusting. The effort to target Sanders supporters has been a lesser noted part of the story, trying to blame Bernie for Clinton's loss, even though she ran a piss-poor campaign.
It's a staging ground. Special
Counsel Robert S. Mueller III, the same Mueller who got us into Iraq, remember that, everyone who was cheering for Mueller, in a case filed last year against 13 Russians accused of interfering with the U.S. presidential campaign, said workers at St. Petersburg facility called the Internet Research Agency were instructed to write social media posts in opposition to Clinton, but to support Bernie Sanders and then candidate Donald Trump. The strategy could receive new attention with the release of Mueller's report expected within days. And already, if there was any kind of indication that Trump had any ties with Russia, I'm pretty sure there would be a little more action towards his administration.
Well, can I jump in?
Go ahead. Jump
we'll
in.
Get back to the rest of the story, but we know that the Internet Research Agency, this group that we're talking about here, is not affiliated directly with the Russian government. This is an Internet Research Agency. This is a group that is attempting to do data collection, to make fantastical, inciting posts and tweets to get engagement from people so they can sell that information to advertisers. That Internet Research Agency did indeed make tweets that were pro-Bernie Sanders, just as they also made tweets and posts that were pro-Hillary Clinton and pro-gun control and anti-gun control and pro-abortion and anti-abortion and for Trump. They're just trying to get clicks. Yeah. They're not trying to sow or to foment discord. They're not trying to promote a particular political agenda. They're trying to get people to click on their stuff so they can grab data and sell it to advertisers. Yeah, this is not a mystery.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, collecting data. I mean, Facebook's been doing that, Twitter's been doing that, and of course, any agency that wants to get clicks and likes, all you have to do is just click on it, and there you go. Your data is given to that said agency or whatever facility. Daniel.
Yeah. So I didn't realize Instagram models was a legal profession. So I want to get into what we said before on this, because it's the same exact argument as before, that Trump, the Russiagate conspiracy is a combination of a number of accurate factors taken out of context and recombined in a way that makes the media able to absolve themselves of their complicit actions of getting Trump elected, giving him $6 billion of free advertising, and going back to Les Nunes of CBS saying Trump may be bad for America, but he's good for CBS. He's making them a lot of money. It's also the only way that the Democratic Party can absolve themselves of their corrupt primary system and say Hillary did nothing wrong.
Hey, Daniel, was there any investigation to the DNC fraud that happened during the 2016 primary? Is that even happening anymore?
I don't think so. I think that they just kind of swept that under the rug.
So everyone's going to ignore that one because that's real election fraud that happened.
But what we want to get back to with this is that the Russiagate is their only way out of admitting that they fucked up. If they can't prove Russiagate, then the Democratic Party can't defend what it did in the primaries. If they can't defend Russiagate, the news can't defend what they did. And they'll have to start turning inward and talking about what's happening in the country rather than this giant distraction trying to reignite the lizard brains of people who were propagandized and corrupt, which is why a lot of the older population are much more susceptible to all this happening because they've already been pre-programmed during the Cold War to hate Russia. So anything you can connect to Russia or communism is terrible. So all they're doing is taking advantage of people's pre-existed biases that they grew up with, that were instilled with them, to pass a conspiracy theory as true, when in reality, Trump probably has money connections with Russians because he's a billionaire.
I have a question for you. I have a question for you, man.
I'll answer in just 1 second.
Yeah, I do.
And so you have Trump, who is taking money. And we've said before that, yeah, he's corrupt. Everyone's corrupt. If you go after Trump for corruption, well, then he may have to go after some other people for corruption with the president. They don't want that. If you take any of these single individual things, it falls apart, because then it's going to backfire. No matter what they do, if they keep it individual, they keep it real, they're going to open themselves up for charges. But if Russiagate's true, so what we're seeing now with Assange and all these other things is, they are backed into a corner because they know that they've been exposed. They know that they've gotten caught. And so now they're just trying to blame something else again.
So, Daniel, real quick, because I want to read a short article that, again, should get everyone a little angry. During the general election, how many Bernie Sanders supporters voted for Clinton, and compare that to what Clinton supporters did for Obama for that general election cycle?
About 12% of Bernie Sanders supporters did not vote for Clinton, whereas 25% of Clinton supporters did not vote for Obama.
Okay, well, so listen to this one, guys. This is from the article from the Washington Post. Although Sanders later denounced the Kremlin efforts and campaigned for Clinton, some Democrats believe he could have done more to smooth over tensions and encourage his supporters to support his one-time opponent. A former senior Clinton campaign official, speaking on the condition of the anomaly to avoid publicly critiquing Sanders ahead of the 2020 primary, said bitterness remains because of the way Sanders repeatedly said the system was tilted against him. Sanders said in May 2016 that party rules enabling Clinton to collect superdelegates did not meet the definition of rigged, but he said it was a dumb process which certainly disadvantaged our campaign. Such a ridiculous
So I want to read out a super chat we just got sent from Lainey Peterson. Lainey, how are you doing? It's been a while. You got to come to our show sometime.
Yeah. Just so you guys know, if you go back way early on in the interviews, like especially when we were on the radio show on Hard Lens Media, she was one of our original co-hosts. So Lainey Peterson, good to hear you. Thank you for the super chat.
She has a very good blog that covers a lot of consumer stuff that, she's told me some stuff that I've passed along in the show. It's
yeah.
Thank you.
Lainey, we miss you so much. Take care. Thank you so much for the support. Huge shout out to Lainey Peterson. So, again, I think they're still holding on to the fact that from this article right now, again, they're holding on to the fact that Bernie Sanders and his campaign are bitter.
Yeah.
That they lost, even though the system was rigged against them. Let's not forget
it's not like they're projecting or anything.
Let's not forget all the polling stations that were shut down, the election machines that were not working correctly.
Bill Clinton blocking Chicago polling stations.
Not one location, but 3 polling locations. We even had people in Florida calling our Illinois state secretary saying, like, hey, there's something wrong happening in Chicago. You got a president at 3 polling locations. It's nuts. That's how corrupt and inept the system is. And again, the bitterness of the Clinton campaign. And they want to still blame Bernie Sanders because who is still standing after the 2016 election cycle? Clinton? Sanders? It's Sanders. He's the one who encouraged people to get out and vote. He's the one who told people to get involved in the political system. And where's Clinton? Somewhere walking in the woods? Really? Really? And this is what the Clinton campaign and the DNC still want to blame somebody. They still want to blame Russiagate, but they also want to blame Bernie Sanders. And this is what we've said in our own individual live streams and even on previous shows in the past, that the establishment media, like the Washington Post, will continue to smear Bernie Sanders and tie him to Trump or tie him to Russia or some other weird conspiracy. And I just can't help but think about a conversation that we had on Tim Black's show where all 3 of us were there, where he said, well, how do we really trust the articles that we read on our shows? Can we even use them anymore? And now I really have to question, should we even be using these articles? I mean, yeah, we should look at them. We should call it their hypocrisy. But how factual is CNN or MSNBC or the Washington Post or New York Times? I mean, ever since the 1996 Telecom Act, which was signed by Bill Clinton, we have 6 major corporations controlling all of our media. All of our media, Paul.
You're right. It makes understanding and reporting on the news extremely difficult when you have to call into question everything that is put out by mainstream press. You have to say, okay, you have this quote. Where did you get this quote from? Let me go back to the source. Every little point they're trying to make, I have to go back to the source to be like, is that accurate? Are you representing that correctly? The other thing that's really important, I think, to note is in this particular case, this particular article by the Washington Post alleging that individuals are Russians and they're the ones that are supporting Bernie Sanders, not only is it obviously trying to minimize Sanders' actual political support, not only is it trying to undermine the progress that his campaign is making and the steps that they're making toward getting a large group of supporters together, this is echoing the exact same pattern of narrative that came out in 2016, where what we're meant to believe is not that the accurate information that was released by WikiLeaks is newsworthy and worth studying and worth understanding, that it proves definitively, with beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the DNC acted with bias toward one candidate specifically against another, against their charter, and that isn't a legal problem for them, that legally they're allowed to do that. We aren't meant to point out that the Democratic Party is entirely undemocratic. What they want to talk about is, oh my God, it was Russia. It was Russia. And so that's what we're into now. They're laying the rhetorical, propagandistic groundwork for everything that they have to say about the Bernie campaign. Is they're going to try and frame as, it's Russia. Be scared, it's Russia.
Yeah, well, here's one final note that I want to add, and this is for everyone. Be prepared for election fraud. So the Bernie Sanders campaign, Tulsi Gabbard campaign, Andrew Yang, and you know what, even the other Democrats too. Be ready for election fraud, because the establishment definitely wants to have an establishment leader to carry their banner. I'm just going to read one final quote because it's going to happen. Jimmy Dore's right, Nico House, Tim Black, and you know we've even said it too, that there's going to be some form of election fraud. Not as bad as it was in 2016, but it'll be enough to be noticed.
It'll be more subtle, more nefarious.
Yes.
And before you get into that quote, I just want to say, we're a small organization that barely has a budget. We all do this as volunteers. We shouldn't be the ones fact-checking the Washington Post.
Yes. So before I get to the final quote, again, Hank Kerschel, dude, you're number one, man. To help grow these Saturday shows, everyone should share the YouTube link on Twitter when the show starts. That doesn't cost anything, and Tulsi Gabbard has the biggest set of onions ever. All right, exclamation. Hey, Hank, man, dude, I really like you, buddy. So one final quote, just so you guys are aware that there will be some form of election fraud. Clinton spokesman Nick Merrill said, the Russians will strike again. Almost sounds like a ridiculous science fiction movie. As a result, he said, it is imperative for everyone else, especially Democratic candidates, to work together and support each other to defend against these threats. I hate the Washington Post.
Well, that's what the CIA and Jeff Bezos want you to think.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're going to move on now to another story. And
something a little uplifting.
A little bit of, yeah. So what's happening in New Zealand? Of course, this is the aftermath of that horrific tragedy that took place. Daniel, what's the response?
Let me try to think of the most theatric way to introduce this. In a world where legislation is never passed in the United States and nothing important is ever accomplished, and stagnation and lack of growth and care for bankers' salaries are the only things that matter, in comes New Zealand. So in New Zealand, we have a case where we had a mass shooting there, unlike all the mass shootings here, because in America, they're American mass shootings, and that changes them somehow. They have already made a vote that passed by 119 to 1, which bans military-style assault rifles. No, on the right wing, no, they're not arguing about what is an assault rifle and what isn't. They just got it done and had it in the bill. So they basically passed it, and by Friday they expect it to go into effect. There's going to be a massive gun buyback from people. And even the NRA equivalent, I don't know what they're called, they're not like the NRA in New Zealand, was like, yeah, this was a terrible tragedy, we need to do something about it, this seems reasonable, because there isn't the same kind of useful, entrenched interest in on lobbying money and corruption that we have. So here you see New Zealand loses 50 people in a mass shooting, and in about a month, they do something about it, very similar to when Australia had a mass shooting. In America, we have a guy in Las Vegas get 10 guns, bring them to a hotel room, and kill over 50 people at a concert, thoughts and prayers. Fuck you. We don't care about your families. Our investment by the NRA is more important, and we want to make sure that we are protecting people from tyranny, even though it's most likely that if tyranny was to occur, these militiamen would be the front line of that tyranny, and defend our rights, even though we've already lost habeas corpus and all of our rights. So congratulations, New Zealand. You did something. You did something fast. You reacted. You took into account what happened to people's lives, and you valued people's lives. I just wish that, you know, the U.S. would believe in such things.
Well, I think we're not going to see that happen in the United States until we have a talk about the influence of the lobby group, most notably the influence of the NRA. They have a lot of power in Washington, D.C. They're very well organized. And, of course, thanks to Citizens United, you know, that's going to be a quote. Thanks to Citizens United. The problems of the world, especially in the United States, thanks to Citizens United, where money is speech and corporations are people, the NRA, like any other lobby group, can buy our politicians to make sure legislation is not passed. Look, I think it's been recently reported that there's a lot of NRA gun owners that want to see responsible gun legislation. And look, there's no way you're going to take away every single gun off the street. There's way too many guns out there available right now, and unfortunately, this is the world we live in, and it's disgusting, it's terrifying, but we got to make sure that there's some form of regulation to make sure that those who are mentally ill or those who are truly disturbed or violent do not have access to these high-grade weapons, or either that, some of these high-grade military weapons are off the streets. And at least you see in New Zealand a parliamentary democracy actually step up and do the right thing. The citizens were just shocked by that even happening to them. That's foreign to them. That's an unknown concept. But here in the United States, it's almost every single day. When South Park did an episode about, you know, shootings happening in schools, I forget what scene it was, but there's this kid saying, a parent saying, "Hey, tell your father what happened." And the kid was like, "Oh, well, this happened at school." And he said, "No, tell him the other thing. Oh, there was a shooting at school today." And the parent's like, "Don't you find something wrong with that?" We are so shell shocked. We have so much. We're so jaded to this, is that it's becoming our norm. We as a society should not have that. And when I look at New Zealand, they did something about it. Now, is New Zealand automatically going to become the new Stalinist regime in the world? I don't think so.
Was over 20 years ago.
And it's
with 20,
yeah,
exactly
go ahead,
20
Paul.
years ago.
Go ahead.
I want to point this out. In the United States in particular, the statistics regarding assault gun murders and deaths are not the largest portion of.
It's like 3% in the U.S.
It's pretty small, and the focus on assault rifles basically boils down to the fact that it's rhetorically a little bit easier. Assault rifles, assault weapons are scary.
They have the word assault in it.
They literally have the word assault in it. Yes, that's right. And then the counter argument is, oh, there's no such thing as an assault rifle. It's a modular. It's like, okay, let's play semantics with this.
I wish that they would apply that same very vociferous defense to the definition of socialism.
Right. So I take a pretty far left stance when it comes to gun control. I think that the Second Amendment should be overturned. I don't think that humans have an unalienable right to own firearms, to own tools that amplify your ability to commit violence. If you're mad at someone and you are so incensed that you want to commit violence against them, your ability to commit violence against them is only amplified by your right to own a tool that does that. Yeah. So the argument can be made that knives also amplify that ability to inflict harm on others, but I don't think anyone would ever make the argument that knives can amplify your ability to commit harm as much as a firearm. I also think that our interpretation of the Second Amendment disrespects the entire first half of the Second Amendment. A well-regulated militia being necessary for the freedom of a free state, or for the protection of a free state, exactly with the end of that. But a well-regulated militia, I think it's reasonable to interpret the Second Amendment to say you absolutely have the right to keep and bear arms as long as you're a member of the National Guard. If you're not a member of the National Guard or some other part of the military that's regulated as a function of protecting our nation state, you don't inherently have that right simply because you're a citizen.
Yeah. I come at this with a different perspective. As a veteran, I personally feel that if you're going to have the right to own arms, you should be in the military service or be a veteran, something like that nature. I mean, that's just my opinion. And look, there's a lot more details into it. But, you know, me and Daniel and you, Paul, we've had this conversation about all the weapons that are available on American streets. And there's just no way you can get all the guns off the street. It's just too impossible. It's a monumental task.
Gun buyback program gets a good
portion.
portion.
There is a gun buy, but it's even then, it still doesn't even get enough of it, which is depressing. And I hate saying that, but we need, here in the United States, we need to have a conversation. So, Daniel, I'm going to let you have the final note for the story because you were leading this.
So I also have a different... I like that we all have different views on the gun story and gun laws. Like, for me, I think that we've lost the proliferation war. There's one gun, basically, for every American now. Again, like, my take would be take out healthcare insurance and then just give them the job of regulating all the guns. I'd love to see how long people hold on to their guns when they cost $20 a month. Yeah. Per gun, and when you increase the size of ammunition, it's like you have people that have been made so paranoid by right-wing news, left-wing news as well, that they buy guns and just stockpile them, ready for some hostile takeover that they would never survive anyway if they fought against. So
you're not going to take out an Abrams tank.
No, you're not. You're not going to take on an Abrams tank. You're not going to take on a squad of people that have been trained for months and months and months to do that kind of work. You're not going to take out the logistical system of the U.S. You're not going to take out the infrastructure. You're not going to take out... It's a lovely fantasy that people think that they would be able to stand against.
Keyword, fantasy. That's why you play video games.
It would be the equivalent of saying, you know who is going to beat the U.S. in Afghanistan? Al-Qaeda. They're going to outgun... Because it's basically the same. In fact, Al-Qaeda has better weaponry than the average American does. So... That's funny right there that they think that. I think that I would also agree with the path that Paul Kit made as well, that if you're someone in the military, like they go to like a Swiss model where they have the guns and grenades that they're given. In the case of invasion, it's in a locked container, and if it is found that you have opened it in any way, shape, or form, you are put in prison. That seems reasonable. As if you're really worried about invasion, well then why not have a setup like that? But when I get down to it, it's how do we take down the amount of guns that we have? And I think the best answer is make annoying insurance claims possible. Make every single gun-related homicide, accident, etc., have all of that be funded by a pool of money that's paid by the people that own guns. That seems reasonable. That's a start.
That might work.
And you're not taking it away from them, so they're not going to complain about that. And it's a tax, and the Supreme Court's had said stuff about taxes. So that's a start, but at this point in time in this generation, I think we've lost that war.
I want to echo one additional point on gun control that Jimmy Dore makes on his show, and I know I'm very vicariously making this point because he's also saying someone else is making it, and I don't remember who he's citing. But it's an excellent point, and that is to say that people make the argument that owning guns is a way to protect their freedoms. You know, when the government is going to come and take your freedoms away, you need to have a way to protect it. And the point is, the government's taking away your freedoms left and right. When are you going to go get them back?
Yeah, we
your
lost
First
habeas.
Amendment freedoms are being eroded.
Yeah.
Your Fourth Amendment freedoms are completely gone. Habeas corpus is gone. When are you going to use these guns to go get your freedoms back?
And don't forget our good friends at the Supreme Court with Citizens United and McCutcheon's decision, where money is speech and corporations are people. They have the speech. They have the freedom. They have absolute power and no responsibility. So, you know, good luck with your revolution. It's not going to happen. But at least in New Zealand, at least the people in New Zealand stepped up.
And
so
also, I want to say
that
on top of what I said, we could also digitize the records, because people are saying in the comments, and they're right, they're just going to bury their guns in their backyard. That's going to be a lot harder when we digitize the records who actually bought guns. And if it's like, oh, you gave your gun away to someone else, well, that sucks. You didn't do it correctly, so you're still going to pay the insurance. Yeah. I just think that the best way to deal with them is just to unleash insurance on gun owners. I think that's just going to take care of a lot, and that's really sad that I think it's going to be effective.
Yeah. So now we're moving on to another story, and you have about two different articles. One set in Ohio and the other one in Texas. It has to deal with abortion. Paul, what's going on, man?
Yeah, I like that we're bumping up gun control and abortion right next to each other, right?
It's almost as if they're connected somehow by like a religion or something.
Yeah.
These special interest groups.
The very narrow sort of left versus right debates in the United States. Anyway, I noticed some odd things this week. Two different state legislatures making moves on anti-abortion legislation. So I wanted to talk about Ohio first because they actually were able to pass this, and it was signed by the governor. So this is actually going to take effect. So it's a controversial bill which bans abortions for many women who don't even know that they're pregnant yet. So it's the heartbeat bill. So up until the point where the fetus has a heartbeat is the only time period in which you could have an abortion, which for most women that comes in about the 6-week mark. So that's, again, before most people would ever know that they're pregnant. So it's an effective ban on abortion. So John Kasich, before this, refused to sign this the heartbeat bill. But he's no longer the governor, so this is now moving forward. So State Representative Michelle Lepore is a Democrat who cried as she talked about the harm the legislation could do during Wednesday's House debate. She said, "I'm concerned that our kids are going to leave, that we're going to lose a large amount of young people who don't want to live in an oppressive atmosphere." This is what... So Janet Folger Porter, who was behind the first version of the Ohio legislation, said in 2016 that we literally crafted this legislation to be an arrow in the heart of Roe v. Wade. So it's made to come before the United States Supreme Court. They're hoping that there will be legal challenges, which there are already legal challenges to this, so that they can run it up to the Supreme Court and use this as an attempt to overturn Roe v. Wade. I don't know or think that will be successful. But why don't we talk about Ohio before we get on to Texas?
Yeah, so I want to say something on this. That is, it's always fascinating to me how the Republican government, I always want to make sure I make the distinction between Republicans and the people that are elected. Very different. I'm talking about people that are elected. Are so keen on keep government out of my guns, keep government out of my soft drink, keep government out of my car regulation, keep government out of housing regulations, keep government out of my bank regulations, but I want to stick my fist up every woman's vagina. I gotta say, it's really twisted, and it's never been anything but insanely twisted how people that can claim that they want small government want every woman's vagina to be regulated by them completely, utterly, thoroughly, and don't want freedom.
Yeah, you know, there's another thing to add on to this, too. It's that you're infringing on a person's choice. And, you know, before even abortion was made legal here in the United States, women would do it themselves, where they go to a more of a shady location to do it, and it would cost them their lives sometimes, man. And
all you're doing is trading clinics for coat hangers.
Yeah.
That's all you're doing.
And why? Why are we doing this? Because it's about power. It's about ego. And
because this old book that's a few thousand years old says I should live a certain way, and I'm only going to read these parts. I'm not going to read the parts about shrimp. I'm not going to read the parts about mixing fabrics, but this part is very important.
And don't forget the part 2 in the Old Testament where God was apparently defeated by another God.
Yeah, well, we don't talk about that.
We don't
that
talk
was,
about
remember, we're not, remember.
Oh, shit, I said it. I said it.
And I like to say that for people that don't want to interpret the Bible and the way it's written, you're heretics by definition. I'm just pointing that out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we were going to talk about religious background on this, the only place in the Bible that explicitly talks about abortion is explicitly in favor of it. It is instructing, if you end up with a slave that is pregnant by your child, it instructs you to give her the bitter medicine, and if the child is born, then it was God's will that you have that child and you should take it under your household. And if that child is not born, then it was God's will that you not have that child. That's the only place in the Bible anywhere that it explicitly talks about terminating pregnancy.
I actually...
And it's explicitly in favor of it.
I had a sticky note I couldn't find over there that actually has that passage. Numbers 11. It's Numbers
it's an Old
something.
Testament
It's Numbers
passage,
something or other.
Yeah, but see, it seemed like the person who wrote that book really had some fucking issues.
Yeah.
But anyways,
well,
Paul,
no, they
were
were all people that represented the time that they existed, and when they existed back then, there were reasons that are different now. But we shouldn't adjust our morality based on situation where people didn't know how to read 2,000 years ago to make decisions in America, the most advanced, wealthiest country in the history of the world.
Yeah.
So this caught my eye too. The reason we're talking, I don't usually like to bring up abortion bills and abortion stuff. It's not really my main beat, but it just caught my eye that
this
both
was
of
super
these things,
ironic.
Yeah, this is really hypocritical and ironic, and it was weird that both of these things happened this week. So a Texas bill has not been signed into law yet, but it was up for long debate on Thursday, and it's a Texas bill that would make abortion from the time of fertilization, so even before what the Ohio bill is, the heartbeat bill, so from the time of fertilization, makes it a capital offense, which, just reminder, Texas, in a capital offense is an offense, a felony that carries the death penalty. So, and it's an offense both against the woman who has an abortion done and against the doctor who provides the abortion. So what Texas is saying is, we believe that any fertilized egg is a human and has full rights and sanctity to life. And so if you deprive that group of cells its right to life, we're going to murder you and the doctor that helped you.
Yeah.
If you kill one person that we consider a person, we're going to murder 2 people. For every one person that has an abortion, we're killing 2 people.
It's an eye for an eye, except one of the things doesn't have any
That
eyes.
is extremely pro-life. Oh, wait, it seems pro-death.
Like I said, this is what I said before, so I'm going to go back to, because we're living with people that think that these are reasonable bills to put out. I say that because, again, those same people have no qualms when we and our bombs blow up pregnant women in the Middle East. So, I would go back to what I said before. The clear solution to this depravity is just right before you do an abortion, you just name the cells an enemy combatant, and they should have no issue with it. And it would be consistent with how they care about pregnant women that get blown up by our bombs. So I think that's an easy solution.
I think a couple of other things that are important to point out about the Texas law is that because they're defining it as from the point of fertilization, that leaves open the question of, so is birth control no longer allowed? Is the pharmacist
what
who
if you
sells
miscarriage?
you birth control? Yeah, what if it's a miscarriage, right? So there's no provider in that case. We're just going to murder the mother who happened to have a miscarriage.
And that's happened before. That's been historic that they've put women who have had miscarriages in prison for having miscarriages.
Right, but also, my point earlier, the egg can be fertilized but not implanted. Yeah. That's how birth control pills work.
Right.
Does that mean the pharmacist that sold you the birth control pill is guilty of murder? But what if you took the birth control pill but weren't sexually active? Are they still guilty of murder? Do we now have to prove that someone was sexually active and it resulted in a fertilized...
So many questions.
I'm sure these legislators at Texas have the right scientific understanding to figure that out. Remember, Texas, live free, except if you're a woman and you don't want to have kids.
Yeah. It's super duper ridiculous. I always point out when we talk about abortion that I really liked the point of view that Freakonomics took on this. It ended up both in their movie and in their first book, that we very rarely get some kind of historical case study, but we have one in this case. So when Roe v. Wade was passed when the Roe v. Wade decision came down in the 70s, it effectively legalized abortion in the United States. At the same time, Romania felt that it was having a population crisis and required that all married couples have at least one child. So forcibly, by law, saying you must have children. So you've got one country who's artificially attempting to inflate its population, while the other country is allowing it to regulate its population on the individual discretion of potential mothers. Mm-hmm. So what ended up happening? So the 90s roll around, and there's a steep decline in violent crime. And everyone's saying, oh, well, it was a decline in the crack market. It was increased policing measures. And a couple people went, it's about 18 years since Roe v. Wade was passed. It seems like potentially a lot of unwanted children who would have grown up in households that didn't give them adequate care didn't grow up to then join gangs and become criminal members of society. Mm-hmm. At the same time, there was a massive spike in crime in Romania, where it's odd that there were a bunch of unwanted children required by the state who grew up in households that didn't give them adequate care and potentially grew up to be criminals. That's about as close of a historical case study as anyone could ever ask for.
But Paul, when you thought about that really thoroughly and used case studies, did you pray to confirm it?
Yeah, and not to mention, did you read the Bible and then the Constitution later?
Huh? Yeah, did you read my pocket Bible?
Right to not have a religion.
Oh, well.
No, you're wrong. This is a theocracy.
Yes.
Or many people are trying to get that to happen. Yeah. I think I just want to kind of close out all this by saying this is a stupid argument based on ancient traditions written in a book that only became a point of contention after this court case was made, when people thought that they could successfully, and they were right, get certain groups of religious people to feel one way and act like a voting bloc on a wedge issue, very similar to guns, which is why we don't talk about these issues that often unless something like this happens and it's worth mentioning, because the entire conversation to begin with was politically split. There wasn't a huge issue with people wanting to buy guns or not. There wasn't the same schism with guns as there was with abortion until people realized that they could take advantage of a schism that they created to get votes. So really, fuck politics on this. Let's do this correctly and not put people's lives at stake because of dumb reasons.
So, all right. We're going to move on.
Hank's back.
Yeah, but we're going to read a quote from Hank. If unity and coming together is a good thing, then how can religion, which divides us, possibly be a good thing? More people have died in the name of God.
True story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Remember, I like to say everyone's an atheist, except atheists just have one more God they don't believe in. Because there's about 3,000 gods on the planet.
Yeah.
And if you believe in Yahweh, you believe in one God, so that's basically an atheist minus those other 3,000. You don't believe in Thor, you don't believe in these other people.
Ugh.
It's just, it's part of, it was an intrinsic, important part of early human development and creation of civilization before writing and all these other things. And religion did keep these groups and tribes together in the same way government was. It was like a proto-government.
We do have to move on, though.
Okay,
Yeah.
I know. I'm
Running
I
out of
have a
time.
lot,
We're running late.
I have a lot on this.
I know. You do have to move on to a very important story because I think we're wasting a little bit. We got to focus on this one. And this has to deal with Assange. So,
oh, yeah,
and
right.
So, saving the best for last, which is why I want to focus more on this story now. Julian Assange, as we all know, on April 11th was dragged out of the Ecuadorian embassy in London. This is a dark day for democracy. It truly is a dark day for journalism because this affects everyone, whether you are a Democrat, Republican, Independent, Libertarian, Green, Socialist, you name it. Any one of your favorite reporters, any content that you like that you get on social media, because we're all on social media. Hardlands Media is part of the independent media. Anyone that you listen to is now, well, basically they could be arrested. And what happened to Julian Assange is a crime. And just so you guys understand what some of our elected officials here in the United States think about his arrest, I'm just going to read you guys just a couple of quotes because there's a lot more in detail that Paul is going to talk about. But I just want to introduce you to your elected officials. First and foremost, Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia was on CNN's New Day, where he said he was basically happy and rejoiced that Assange is now our property and we get the facts and truths from him, which means we're probably going to torture Julian Assange. This is from good old Chucky Boy, Senator Minority Loser Leader Chuck Schumer from New York, Democrat. I hope he will soon be held to account for his meddling in our elections on behalf of Putin and the Russian government. God, you're a hack fraud. You know that? You know that, Chuck Schumer? Hey, Chuck, you're a fraud.
Chucky the Shoom.
Chucky the Shoom. Yeah, goddamn idiot. What he's really become is a direct participant in Russian efforts to undermine the West and dedicated accomplice in efforts to undermine American security, said Senator Mark Warner, Democrat from Virginia. Senator Ben Sasse, Republican from Nebraska, called Assange a wicked tool of Vladimir Putin and Russian intelligence services who deserves to spend the rest of his life in prison. Then from House of Foreign Relations Committee Chair Elliot Engel, a Democrat from New York, time after time compromise the national security of the United States and our allies by publicly releasing classified government documents and confidential materials related to our 2016 presidential election cycle, which means, they're angry that he showed all the war crimes that the United States was committing, all the corruption, and the election fraud that happened during the 2016 primary against Secretary Hillary Clinton and Senator Bernie Sanders. So it goes on and on and on and on about all these Democrats basically and Republicans too saying, now that we got Assange, now we get the truth from him, now we're going to torture him. Oh, wait, they didn't say that. But I'm going to read at least one good quote. One quote in particular from one Democratic leader who's running for president, who actually has the courage to talk about it. And it's from the representative from Hawaii, Tulsi Gabbard. The arrest of Julian Assange is meant to send a message to all Americans and journalists. Be quiet, behave, toe the line, or you will pay the price. Do you know what that means? Now that Assange is arrested, you're next. Everybody's next. And only one person had the courage to see the real perspective. We're all going to be impacted by this. Does that not frighten you? I'm frightened. I'm concerned. I don't like the idea that he was arrested. And the very fact that we have the corporate media turning a blind eye to this says a lot about the system that we have. So, Paul? tell us a little bit more what's happening.
Yeah, so first of all, I have a slight correction to issue for anyone that watched my live stream that I talked about this on Thursday. I talked a lot about the conviction and or not the conviction, but the indictment. And I mentioned that he's being indicted under the Espionage Act. That was a slight mischaracterization. He's being charged under the Conspiracy to Commit Computer Intrusions Act. But it does rely heavily on language from the Espionage Act. So that's what, I was challenged basically on how is this an assault on press freedoms. He's being charged with the computer crime because he helped with this hacking. First of all, we don't have adequate public information to determine that, right? A court case will have to go forward to determine any of that. But what it appears as, Assange, the password cracking thing appears to be, look, Chelsea Manning has access to these documents but wants to download them anonymously, so is trying to find a different way in to get the documents that she already has access to so that she won't be found out. So by helping crack that password, it doesn't, to me, rise to the level of computer intrusion because, again, it's things that she already has access to. It would be as if it was paper documents we were talking about, it would be as if the source went to the journalist and said, yeah, I have access to these files, but the room has security cameras. How can I get them? And the journalist recommends you can stay anonymous if you wear a mask. Did that journalist now commit this crime by recommending a method by which you can maintain anonymity? I think that's kind of a stretch. Yeah. But the other thing is that once you establish that, once you say, well, he was involved in the hacking, now the transmission of that data is also at fault. One of the things they call out in the indictment, it's paragraph 21, I was talking about this last night, they talk about using a secure online Dropbox to transfer the material. So now the tools with which we use to transfer materials are also part of the conspiracy to hack into things. So it's a very thin, it's very frustrating because this is pretty obviously an Espionage Act or inspired by the Espionage Act. And to the quotes that you were mentioning earlier, people who are trying to make the case that this is all related to the 2016 disclosures, that it was all Russian hacking, none of that is mentioned in the indictment. The actions mentioned in the indictment and the reason Chelsea Manning is in prison right now for refusing to testify to a grand jury is because this has everything to do with the 2010 disclosures that showed that the U.S. government was committing international war crimes in Afghanistan and Iraq.
So I think that to kind of buttress on what Paul was saying even more, it's as if they're making, like, to use a paper analogy again, if someone even comes up to you with documents and says, hey, I took these, it's going to prove that my employer is corrupt. Well, you handed them to the person, so you aided them in transferring the document, which is a crime. It's just a very clever way of getting around the law because they're saying, and Obama reached the same thing in 2010, I believe, when they said, he is a journalist, he's following journalistic law, he's doing all these different things. We really can't hit him with anything, otherwise we're going to completely the Pentagon Papers, any other leak, anything like that is going to be made illegal by precedent. So, like Paul's saying, they're criminalizing the transfer of the files, which is the same as criminalizing the files to begin with.
Well, which is predicated on proving that he somehow aided and abetted in the access to those files.
Yeah, and that hasn't even been proven. But the fact that they're not even doing that, because if they really felt that they had a case against him for the other stuff that everyone, I have another quote I'll get to in a little bit,
yeah,
that they would go after him for that. But because they can't, it's probably very similar to why Obama didn't, because they realized, oh, he actually didn't do anything illegal, so how can we nickel and dime a conviction?
There's also something else we got to take away from this, too. Now, originally, President Trump, during the general primary and even during the general election, he was in support of WikiLeaks because it was helping him with his narrative saying that Hillary Clinton was corrupt and the Democrats were corrupt. And because this was in the early days of the Russiagate story as well, and there was a lot of ties. There were people, the media was really trying to tie President Trump and his administration to Russia and Vladimir Putin, and because of that, the media, who originally loved Julian Assange, then started tying him to Russia and Vladimir Putin as well. And already the White House administration is not making any comments. They're just trying to write. They're going to, I think, call for Julian Assange to come to the United States because Trump now that he's been proven not connected with Russia, is basically walking around the country saying, see, I'm not tied with Russia. I'll bring Julian Assange here and not face any consequences. And so because of this, because of the media constantly talking about Russiagate and spewing this ridiculous conspiracy theory, President Trump, again, is going to do everything he can to prove that he's not tied to Russia. And if that means bringing Julian Assange here to face U.S. trial, he is going to do it, because now he has all the proof in the world, not only with the Mueller report, but with all of the actions as well towards Russia, to really force his narrative by saying, I'm not with Russia. And you could thank the idiots at corporate media at CNN, MSNBC, to really push this narrative. And now none of them are going to speak up for Julian Assange, but at least members of the independent media like ourselves are acknowledging that this is a threat to journalism as a whole. I don't care what your political beliefs are. We're all threatened by this. And honestly enough, I'm still shocked by this, because we saw this on Jimmy Dore's show, where he did a segment on Tucker Carlson of Fox News, of all places. If Tucker Carlson can get it right on establishment media about why this is a danger to journalism here in the United States, and why this is ridiculous, and why no one else at MSNBC and CNN are talking about it, it should get all of you mad. Because Tucker Carlson was correct on his talking points. And yeah, we don't like anything else he says, but he's correct on this. And Jimmy Dore was acknowledging it too. Like, why is it that someone on Fox News, of all places, is really calling out why it's wrong for Julian Assange to be taken in? This is a threat to democracy and to free press and to journalism.
So I just think, again, it's perhaps we can look at it another way. Well, we've already said for a while that mainstream media is basically just a various propaganda rag for one group or another. Obviously, Washington Post is Jeff Bezos, NBC is Comcast, CNN is Time Warner, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe if we believe our own premise that corporate media is propaganda, that might be why they're not worried about this, because this only affects journalists trying to get corruption out of the government. And if that's not your goal and your purpose, it wouldn't affect you one bit.
All right, Paul?
I wanted to give some context to what I was saying earlier about the indictment drawing on the Espionage Act while not actually charging the Espionage Act. So there's a paragraph here that says that Assange to knowingly access a computer without authorization and exceeding authorized access to obtain information that was determined by the United States government pursuant to the executive order and statute required protection against unauthorized disclosure for reasons of national defense and foreign relations, namely, and here's the bit that is copy-pasted straight from the Espionage Act, documents relating to the national defense classified up to the secret level, with reason to believe that such information so obtained could be used to the injury of the United States and the advantage of any foreign nation, and willfully communicate, deliver, transmit, and cause to be communicated, delivered, or transmitted to any person not entitled to receive it, and willfully retain the same and fail to deliver it to an officer or employee entitled to receive it. You intended to disseminate this information. How dare you, journalists, want to tell people about things that are true and inconvenient to the U.S. government? This is language, and they further later so the second part of the alleged computer crime explicitly notes that the indictment is pulling from two sections of the Espionage Act, 793C and 793E, even though Assange was not charged with violating the Espionage Act. This is the weird corner case that they're in. They're not allowed. They don't want to try Assange under the Espionage Act because that sets a bad legal precedent for journalism, and they feel that they can obfuscate that by saying that it's a computer intrusion act problem. But this is a little bit like, okay, well, we all sort of know that the U.S. government's main beef with Al Capone wasn't his taxes. Like, we all know that. We all know that we were trying to get him because he was a major gangster. He was involved in a lot of murders. He basically spawned organized crime in the United States. But we didn't have the legal levers to do that. So when is it appropriate to have the motivations to go against someone not be able to rise to a legal bar that allows that? And so you're going to try and stick something else on, in this case, which is not proven, extremely nefarious, and appears to be, again, motivated by the fact that they're upset and embarrassed that the information that was leaked implicates them in international crimes.
Yeah. So I want to say two things on it. I think that one of the most dangerous and obvious paths that a democracy can take to an authoritarian dictatorship is to make it illegal to expose the government's corruption. I think
well,
that's
Daniel,
first.
how are you going to hold it? Hey, listen, if the government can pass laws that basically say, hey, it's legal for us to lie to you, but if you expose our lie, well, boy, oh boy, are we going to make sure you serve jail time.
That's really quite terrifying.
Yeah.
That's exactly what we would see in dictatorships. Then you're basically almost at a thought crime level right away.
Yeah. And look, here's the consequence, because I want to lead into that quote too that you have in front of you. The problem is because of the corporate media and their narrative of Russiagate and portraying Julian Assange as this bad person, this evil boogeyman doing Putin's bidding, a lot of people in this country have it in their thought that, well, he's caught. We're finally going to get justice. Even though the Mueller report's not going to show anything for Russiagate at all. Let's actually talk about really the consequences of this, of the propaganda of Russiagate, because it's making people think that Assange is this bad guy, when in fact his arrest will impact us all, whether we know it or not.
So this quote, I'm going to leave anonymous. I thought a while before doing this. It's someone I argue with on Facebook who used to be a lobbyist and now is in political office somewhere. I really don't want to get into too much detail, but I'm going to read what he said on this just to kind of lead into this. Assange is not a journalist, though. He's an agent. Who he works for and what his agenda is aren't clear. The American First Amendment doesn't protect foreign nationals living in a foreign country doing the bidding, wittingly or unwittingly, of a foreign power that seems to not have our best interests at heart. Whistleblowing is good, but targeted whistleblowing is politics. There is a rumor that Mueller indicted him via sealed indictment, so before everyone gets all excited about what they believe the conclusion will be, we should see what happens next. The story isn't over. There's more to it, but I'm only going to read that section. This person is not a newspaper. He's not a federal official. It's a local official. So, and on his page, many people agreed with this sentiment. So, I know Paul wants to break this down, but I want to say how dangerous it is for a politician to have the nerve to tell a journalist whether or not they're a journalist, and then predicate that on, well, the U.S. amendments only apply, except when they bring him to the U.S., they will apply to him, and think that through. And just like you said, he's going, oh, well, it's not technically being brought for a computer. It's a computer crime. It has nothing else, but I won't let you break this down.
Yeah, so this argument that is being made is trying to undermine. Did you read this out completely already?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, so I wanted to bring up Aaron Maté gave a great sort of rebuttal to this general argument, not to this specific person, but to this general argument. And he says, the journalists decreeing that Assange is not a journalist aren't actually saying something about Assange, but about themselves. Assange engages in journalism that exposes the powerful. So those excommunicating him from journalism are saying they identify with the powerful. He's exactly right. It's very, very hard to make the case that Assange is not acting in a journalistic capacity. He absolutely is. I don't know how you.
How many words can you win before you're considered a journalist?
Right. Okay, there's one note that we have to remember, is that if Americans remain silent on this, and look, I don't care what your political beliefs are, if you remain silent on this issue, if you remain silent on the idea that this will not impact you down the road, you're kidding yourself. We don't have a democracy. We live in an oligarchy, and in an oligarchy, only the top 1% control everything. And we have a media that's owned by corporations. We have an establishment political system. We don't have two parties. We have one single party that's bought off by the top 1%. And there's no one holding those in power accountable. And Julian Assange, what he did, it angered both Democratic establishment leaders and Republican establishment leaders. So to Democratic voters and Republican voters and independent voters, just remember, the establishment doesn't care about you. They will continue to lie to you. They'll continue to misuse your tax dollars. Sorry about that. They'll continue to constantly abuse your rights and just say, hey, it's all for freedom. We know what we're doing. And no one's going to hold them accountable. This should anger all of us. We should be out there in the streets protesting. We should be calling Julian Assange a hero. Okay, and I'm guaranteed that there's a lot of people still angry and salty about 2016 and the general election cycle and their hopes for Russiagate to be a thing. But at the end of the day, the story is over about Russiagate. The Mueller report is going to show that there's no ties between President Trump and Russia. And you know what else it's going to show? That there's no ties between Julian Assange and Russia. So then why are we keeping this man in jail? Why did we pull him out of the Ecuadorian embassy? It's because of torture him, to make him spill out facts against his other colleagues, to tear apart independent journalists, and to once again give power to the top 1%. Is that the world you want to live in? And this goes out to anyone. Is this the world you want to live in? Because you know what? Not me. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, so Hank earlier on in the super chat mentioned a tweet from Ro Khanna. We were trying to find exactly which tweet he was talking about, and the best I could find was Ro Khanna yesterday tweeted, "Tonight on Hardball Chris, I will argue that the overbroad indictment of Assange is a chilling suppression of speech. The indictment criminalizes journalists asking a source for info or deleting chat logs. I detest that Assange helped Trump, but this violates the First Amendment." I guess the only sentence in there that I really disagreed with is that I detest that Assange helped Trump. Yeah. Assange maybe vicariously helped Trump, but in reality, what he did was expose the malfeasance of the Democratic Party, the DCCC, and the Hillary Clinton campaign.
And even if you want to take that argument and extend it and say, okay, let's assume for a second that it's a somewhat relevant argument. I mean, if I was a guy and one of the presidential candidates said that they wanted to drone strike me, and the U.S. has a history of actually following through with that, I might be a little bit worried about them becoming president for personal reasons as well. And I'm just going to leave that out there. But I'm also going to say that, again, this is a dangerous precedent that exposing government corruption is criminal. I think I also want to add into that another way of reading that comment with Trump. I showed you guys a little meme that I had on my phone earlier about WikiLeaks. Republicans and Democrats have liked WikiLeaks at different times. When he would publish information that was damaging to Republicans, the Democrats loved him. When he was putting out information that was damaging to Democrats, Republicans liked him. So maybe another way to put it is, if they just cool down and wait 5 years, they'll just flip sides again. The Democrats will love him because of the next leak. But I appreciate Ro Khanna, because if he feels that way about him, I greatly appreciate that even though he feels that way, which I disagree with, which you disagree with, he's at least being consistent that even though I feel this way, it's wrong because of precedent, because of what's right, and I may disagree. I may even think that I may even take someone more serious when they speak that way, because they feel conflicted, but they're still going with what is correct.
I think it's also, look, here's the fear that I have, and we should all have, is that if they can come after Julian Assange, just like that, Jimmy Dore even said it, they could shut down his show, they could shut down our show, and they could shut down any other independent media network, whether it's left-leaning, center, libertarian, right-leaning, you name it. Okay, progressives, we're all targeted by this. And we need to have a real force of state. CNN, MSNBC, and all the other establishment media outlets, they won't do the job, because guess what? A lot of those anchors are paid a 6-figure, 7-figure salary. They're living a very good life. And the last thing they want is someone to rock the apple cart. We need real independent media in this country, and we need people who are going to hold both sides accountable and all those in power accountable for whatever actions they do, because it is the service of independent media to protect the citizens and inform the populace. Paul.
I agree with that statement 100%. I want to bring up, just like you argue with someone online and we want to keep them anonymous, I also have debates with someone, and that person shall remain nameless. But I have been challenged that it is not fair for me to make the case that this is an assault on press freedoms or an assault on the First Amendment, because this is not being charged under the Espionage Act. This is being charged under, so this is a conspiracy to commit computer fraud, which is the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, CFAA. So what I am challenged with is not to show that the motivations of the United States government are to silence a member of the press or a journalist, despite the fact that we have admission from the Obama administration that they have the New York Times problem, which is why they couldn't indict Assange, which is why, we're finding weird workarounds to get him indicted. That's not what I should be looking at, that rather I should find an example of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act that was also being handled in an uneven way, which seems like a very, very difficult and high bar to prove this. So if I'm not allowed to look at public statements toward motivation, then if I have to divine or discern motivation based on previous Computer Fraud and Abuse Act cases, I am going to need the assistance of lawyers and legal experts who have experience with the CFAA and specifically conspiracy to commit computer intrusion against U.S. States. So an open call if you were a lawyer, professor of law, particularly someone here in the city of Chicago, would be helpful, but I am actively soliciting anyone with legal expertise on the CFAA to ask further questions, look for other legal precedent, and try to meet this unnecessarily high bar to assert my case.
So, Paul, I mean, it seems completely reasonable. You just have like $10,000 lying around for a lawyer just on a lark to try and find some differences within a case that ultimately doesn't matter, right? I mean, that's an easy bar to reach.
Right. So the weird thing about this claim is that what they're saying is it doesn't matter that Assange said that he was being, attempted to be extradited to the United States on false pretenses when it came to the Swedish sexual assault allegations,
which were dropped, by the way.
Which he was never charged with.
Yeah.
The investigation was dropped.
Yeah, in fact, the prosecutor was held in contempt.
That we've been saying this is, it's an assault on press freedoms. That specifically in the indictment they're calling out the 2010 disclosures of the Iraq and Afghanistan tape. That it's specifically they have a grand jury about against Chelsea Manning that she's in prison for. That they don't seem to really have much information that they still need from her, because all the information they had in this indictment she provided in a prior grand jury. None of that matters. The only thing that matters is the part of the indictments that says, oh, well, this is under the CFAA, not an espionage act. So now it's not a press freedoms thing anymore. It's just he's stealing stuff from the government. That's why we're mad. We're not mad about any of the things that we've said we're mad about, that we're saying we're trying to prosecute on, that we've demonstrated repeatedly that is our motivation. None of those motivating factors are important. Now, up to this person, the only thing that's important is what is the legal precedent of other CFAA cases, and can we show that the CFAA was prior used on someone in an uneven way to remove their press freedom rights. So, not that this could set a precedent. Mm-hmm. There must be prior precedent. There's no way that a new case could set new precedent. That's not possible. Note the sarcasm, please.
So, it's like, hey, Paul, I'm not firing you or laying you off. You're just going to work without pay for a while.
Guys, there's another thing, too, we got to remember. And this is when me and Daniel were working on our videos yesterday for Friday. We uploaded some content, and I worked on a video on Tulsi Gabbard defending Julian Assange. Please check out that YouTube video. It's recently in our videos. But it's very important to note that when she was on CNN, Tulsi Gabbard, Jake Tapper, the brilliant journalist there, said to her, well, don't you feel that the documents released by Julian Assange put U.S. troops and military assets in danger? And the thing is, he didn't even understand how to respond to the answer. It was Tulsi Gabbard said this: it has not been proven. There's no evidence to prove that those documents released put any U.S. military actions or assets in danger. And it is yet to be proven. There's not enough evidence to prove that that was a real fact. But that was fact enough for corporate media to sell to you, the American people, as propaganda. Because now we have a corporate media that's going to tell you lies, say that it's fact, and as soon as someone exposes 1 ounce of it, they're discredited, and they'll do everything they can to silence that individual. They'll do everything they can to make sure that that individual who's a whistleblower or someone who's trying to inform the public that they are a threat to democracy. And that's the beginning steps of a dictatorship, to a tyranny. We live in an oligarchy, but we're just a hairbreadth away just to becoming just another dictatorship. And the thing is that you'd think it would be Trump that would build this system up. But this system was built for years. It started with Reagan, continued on to Bush Sr., Bill Clinton, Bush Jr., Obama, and it was inherited by Trump. That's the system we have. This thing was built to be pro-corporate, pro-establishment, and now we are stuck in a very dangerous crossroad. Daniel?
I got nothing. I mean, it's...
Okay.
It's all very depressing,
yeah.
right?
It's very depressing, but I tell you what. Here's the thing. People got to step up.
At least. It's not... Here's what I'll say in a positive. In previous years, especially before social media, no one would know about this. This wouldn't be covered by anyone. We're at least at the point where everyone's talking about it, and at least that, even if it's pretty one-sided in mainstream media, a discussion is happening, and perhaps And that's more than we've had in the past.
I got a perfect note. I got a perfect note to end this on. Look, to all our viewers and subscribers, this is where my challenge comes to you directly. Now's the time for all of you to step up and get involved. The only way we're going to implement change is if you, the people, step up. It's actions that's gonna require real change, and you guys are gonna have to do the job. All of you. I don't care what your political beliefs are, whether you're left or right, libertarian, independent, green, socialist. Okay, I don't care. This affects all Americans, and we need to hold our elected officials accountable. We need to get money out of politics. We need to create a real democracy here in this country, and we need to start talking about the issues, collaborate, form a coalition, and unite. That's how we're going to do it. We need to have a political revolution, and we need to have true independent media. And if we're going to fight for a better future, it's you that has to step up. Don't be that person who says that they wish they could have helped. All right, this is Kit with Hard Lens Media. I want to thank my co-host Paul DuPont, Daniel Lupker. I apologize for not introducing you guys earlier on, but you guys should know who they are already. I mean, Jerome already put the name title cards right here.
I have a name under
We
there.
should also go over what we have coming up tomorrow.
Okay, so real quick, for Chicago Corner, we're going to be early, 5 p.m. Central Standard Time, and also we have a guest, David Sparks. We actually met him in Philadelphia. He's got a very interesting story. We'll be more than happy to speak to him again. And also, myself and Daniel Lupker, we will be covering the CNN Town Hall for Andrew Yang. He's running for the Democratic nomination for the 2020 primary. So this should be a very action-packed episode for tomorrow. So 5 p.m. Central Standard Time. We will be going live, so please tune in. And I've also noticed a little funny thing in the chat that a lot of people were talking about pizza, and guys are getting me hungry for some Chicago-style pizza. So way to go, guys!
I want to also add. I'm going to slightly unveil a secret that we're working on that we haven't even come close to planning. Just to give you guys a little heads up, we are looking at some point in the future to have a nice first gathering with all of you guys watching. Everyone else that's a fan and people that are out of town. We'll have a video set up. We'll figure it out, but. Be ready for that.
Yes, so more information on that. So if you like Hard Lens Media, please make sure you're subscribed and hit that ring bell notification. YouTube's acting weird, but and some people are getting notified, some people are not. Just please make sure you're subscribed. Double check again, hit that ring bell notification, and please support our other pages. We are on Twitter, Facebook, and on Instagram. And if you really support independent media, we have a Patreon page. Your support is really helping us build the largest independent progressive media network here in the city of Chicago and the Midwest. We want to build this network with all of you. We want you guys to help us, and you guys have a voice to help us contribute. We really want to build something that's going to be informative for the American people, to collaborate with other independent media networks. As you already know, we've been on Jimmy Dore's show, Tim Black's, Nico House. We've talked to a lot of other independent media outlets as well, and we really want to build something in the United States to where never ever again will corporate media dictate lies to the American people. It's up to the American people and all of you to step up.
And it's you guys that are making it happen. If we just sat here every week and no one watched, what will we really matter? Yeah. We matter because you guys watch and you guys care. And because you guys like our content, we're now at past 6,000 subscribers, and we want to continue growing, and you guys are really making it happen. So I can't thank you guys enough. I want to say one more thing. With your guys' help in this new format we've been working with since the beginning of the year, it took us a year and a half to reach, about a year and a half to reach our first 1,000 subscribers. To get from 5,000 to 6,000 took 2 weeks. That's you guys. You did that. Man. Thank you. No, we can't thank you guys enough. You guys are real patriots and heroes. And again, support independent media. We'll see you guys at Chicago Corner tomorrow. Peace, everyone.